What happened when you ignored the "don't try this at home" warning? When I was about 10, I folded myself into the sleeper sofa with the help of my cousin. Here's why this is an incredibly bad idea. You can't breathe. You can't move. You can shout for help, but your cries for it will travel at the best 5 feet because your mouth is smothered by a mattress. The spring mechanism, in combination with your weight, will make it nearly impossible for someone to pull the mattress back out unless they're very strong or you're very light. My cousin had to run upstairs to get a grown-up to flip the sofa on its side so I could roll out. If I did this stunt while I was by myself, I probably would have suffocated very quickly. Do you remember lawn darts? My group of friends made our own rules. 2 teams, one in the front yard, one in the back. 1 member of each team on the side lawn from where you could see both teams at the same time. We only had 1 dart, we'd lost the others in a game of woods darts. The goal was to rifle that one fricking dart over the house and make a member of the other team, rightfully afraid for their life, move out of the way of said dart, and 1 point if you made them move. -1 point if it landed within arm's reach and they didn't move. The game lasted until someone's parents came home and were horrified when they saw what we were doing. The 80s were a simpler, bloodier time. Me and my friend decided to golf off of each other when we were about 14. The initial idea was to drive off the tea that was in our mouth, but then common sense kicked in and we decided against it. But still wanting to go through with something, we decided to do it with our butt cheeks. Ugh. I went first as the hitter, and it went way better than I expected. I lined that crap up and drove it as far as I could, while still caring for my friend's buttocks' safety. Not a scratch on him, so I was ready to be hit off. I laid down on my stomach and put the tee in place, and my friend lined his shot up and goes all in for his swing. He follows through and puts the driver right into my butt cheeks, and at that moment it felt like everything I once knew was wrong, and my butt was freaking hurting like heck, but that's besides the point. Listen to the advisory, kids. Wait, you say that there's an advisory, but never in my life have I seen a warning or had an instructor tell me not to do this. You know what did tell me not to do this? My goddamn common sense. Dry ice and a little bit of water in a plastic bottle. Bad idea. The bottle expanded but didn't explode. We basically had an armed bomb laying on a soccer field next to a playground. We had to make it explode somehow, so my dad took a long stick and hit it a couple of times. The bottle finally exploded and my dad heard ringing in his ears for about a year. We didn't find any traces of the bottle. My brother and I got the bright idea to see what happens if you put one of those CO2 cartridges used for BB weapons into a fireplace. Long story short, the resulting explosion filled most of the main floor of the house with flying chunks of burning wood. My mum was not amused. Split a cucumber by throwing knives at it. My friends and I were putting stuff in the microwave. Apparently, eggs not only explode, but they're hot as fricking napalm. I decided to make my own fireworks. Apparently, potassium nitrate, or stump remover, and sugar mixed together make for a pretty good smoke bomb. The way you make it is you mix the 2 ingredients together and put it in a pan over a small flame. The heat melts the 2 together into a chocolatey brown goo. If you put that goo into a cardboard toilet paper roll and stick a wick in there, you have a pretty big smoke bomb. The first time I did it, we had a lot of fun smoking out an entire park. Then I decided we needed to go bigger. This is America after all. So I doubled the ingredients and started cooking it on my stove. Stupid me forgot that the video said medium to low heat and I had the burner on high. Halfway through cooking it, the heat caught the mixture on fire and started going crazy. I got my brother out of the house and dumped water on the mixture. For the next 2 hours, you couldn't go into my house because the smoke was so thick you couldn't see more than 2 feet in front of you. My parents were furious at first because the ceiling was burned, the countertops charred, and the floor was even melted a bit. Then once they got the insurance money, their attitude changed completely. The insurance covered the ceiling, all of our cabinets, and a couple of the countertops that were burned. The stove was melted and even the dishwasher caught some damage. We're very thrifty and the do-it-yourself kind of people. We bought all of our appliances second-hand, even the cabinets. And with the money we saved, we bought the raw material for the marble countertops and put it in ourselves. We also tiled the floor ourselves. We still had some money left over, so we bought a nice granite table at the flea market. People don't realize what you can accomplish by learning to do things on your own and going to flea markets and Craigslist. So we now have a brand new kitchen that's way nicer than our last one. In short, made bootleg fireworks, destroyed my kitchen, and now we eat off marble and granite. I had the great idea to fire some fireworks inside my house. You can try it at home, but I wouldn't recommend it. It was fun though. I was told not to try making small firecrackers at home. I still have all 9 of my fingers, and I had fun too. Probably every wrestling move on my brothers in 2000 and 2001. Sometimes it went wrong and hurting them, like powerbombing them on the wooden edge of the bed. My brother and I made thermite in high school and melted a GameCube, among other things, with it. I feel like Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman told us not to try that at home at least once. My friends and I recently used our pool skimmer to have a pole vaulting tournament as seen on a nationwide commercial. The fact that the idea came from an insurance commercial should have been enough to deter us. We ended up vaulting all the way to the far end of the pool, and I smashed my feet into the wall. Besides 2 sprained ankles, everyone else was fine. The pool skimmer worked really well as a vaulting pole. When I was about 10, I jumped off my 15-foot deck with an umbrella. Yeah, don't try that. I tried to rebuild the paper crossbow from Mythbusters along with many other things from that show. Royal Rumble in the back garden. 4-on-4. I fly-kicked my cousin into the wall, cracked his head open, goes to the hospital and gets stitches. A few years later, he tried pushing me into the pool. I pulled him in with me and his chin caught the edge. More stitches. We don't talk much these days. I put orange juice in a soda stream and tried to carbonate it. It had a warning specifically saying not to do that. I read said warning. I'm usually not the kind of person who ignores warnings, but this didn't seem like it would be an issue. I thought it was because the carbonator tube would get sticky and clog, but I thought that I could clean it. Nope, that's not why. It's because it freaking explodes. I was finding sticky spots for months. An 8-year-old me, unsupervised, heard the term electromagnet on TV. Smart as I was, I assumed the rest and proceeded to take a magnet, tape 2 wires to it, and stick the ends in a socket while holding said contraption in my hands. 220 volts AC passing through the human body is definitely a bit more than a mild inconvenience. Received a jolt that I remember clearly to this day. Burned the socket board, tripped the mains, and learned a lesson for life. I'm glad that I wasn't eliminated from the gene pool that day. When I was about 10 or 11, my friends and I used to imitate Jackass, but our show was called Dumb Idiots. I was the biggest one out of all of us, so I took the brunt of the damage. One of the dumbest things we did was have me stand on an office chair and another of my friends drop-kick it. I ended up falling face first onto the floor. I wasn't too injured, but it hurt. I'm fairly certain that every group of idiot teen boys has tried to be Jackass at some point. I know mine did. We got lucky, and the footage was lame anyway. The warning at the beginning of that show was seen and ignored by us. Kids are just dumb. I hit a basketball-sized hornet's nest with a baseball bat. Much stinging, much pain. So you know those parkour videos? I tried doing some of that when I was 12. I jumped from a bench onto a small wall and landed on my belly. Ugh, that was painful. I couldn't breathe and my thighs hit the edge, so I couldn't walk either. But I looked cool, right? I was staying at my friend Ben's house, who was a bit of a latchkey kid. The movie Daredevil had just come out and I was maybe 12. It was 2 in the morning and we were busy skating around the front of the house, annoying the frick out of his neighbors. I got the awesome idea that we should light the skate rail we had on fire, just like in Daredevil. So I grabbed a can of gasoline that was sitting in his garage and proceeded to coat the rail with it. After coating the rail with gasoline, I lit the gas and it was a little bit lackluster. I figured, let's just throw some more gas on that thing. So I did. The gas trickling out of the can caught fire and the can exploded in my hand. Luckily, my reflexes saved my butt and I let go of the can just as the flame hit. Ben's lawn was completely aflame. I just walked inside and didn't do anything about it because I didn't want to get into trouble. In short, tried to be Ben Affleck, lit my friend's lawn on fire. I never ignored the "don't try this at home," but I did frequently visit sites where I had to confirm I was 18 plus all throughout my teens. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I cringe whenever I remember this. When I was 12 or 13, the movie Jackass was really popular with my friends, and we'd watch it almost daily. We thought they were so cool and funny for doing stupid stuff for the sake of a laugh. Well, we'd tried to recreate some of the stupid gigs they performed. One day, while my mum took my friends and me to the grocery store, my friends convinced me to pull a prank on some poor guy shopping. I grabbed a huge pack of toilet paper, walked right up behind this dude and threw the TP at his back. He turned around and screamed at me, a little nerdy 12-year-old girl in glasses, and walked away. I've never been more mortified, and since then, from that day on, I decided Jackass was really, really dumb and immature. I tried to make a potato launcher out of PVC pipe one summer day. The guy on the YouTube video said not to try it at home without adult supervision, but of course, at the ripe age of 15, I wasn't going to let that stop me. So I went to the garage and gathered up all of the required materials. My parents probably wouldn't notice a bunch of PVC and their sack of potatoes missing anyways, and proceeded to build my masterpiece. I figured that just having it shoot straight would be kinda lame, so I decided to pseudo-mod it by cutting a slit into the edge of the PVC cap to act as a sort of scope. The thing is, I forgot to shave off the ends that were stuck on the barrel and proceeded to fire off my first round. I ended up getting potato bits everywhere in my garage and almost cut my arm open on a flying piece of PVC. Remember, kids, do not do this at home is a valid warning. I launched bottle rockets out of my buddy's ear gauges. Saw the warning saying not to try it at home, so I went to my neighbor's house and did it there instead. My brother and I would play WWE with some of our friends as kids, and my brother would never let anyone win, so one day he came after me when I had one of the championships. I forgot to say that he had the other 2 belts. So he and I had a match, and at one point I decided to go for a powerbomb. I couldn't lift him up all the way and dropped him on the air conditioner accidentally. He was on the ground, lying in the fetal position in a puddle of water, so I went for the pin, and the jerk put his arm up. I remember the kids that were doing commentary screaming out of shock. I waited for him to get up and went for a super kick, and I missed, and he pushed me into the bottom left corner of the window, and that piece broke and I got a cut on my forehead. I wanted to cry so bad, but he tackled me into the wall, put me on the bed, and did a rock bottom from the bed onto the floor. He pushed me off the goddamn bed. He pinned me and won my damn cardboard belt. He held all titles in our little wrestling group at the time, and I still hate him for it. I drank antifreeze on purpose. It's both spicy and sweet at the same time. Not in a Chinese food kind of way, in a chemical reaction on your tongue kind of way. It's delicious, and if you taste it, you'll understand why animals and children will drink it. Not recommended. You know, because of the horrible poisoning effect. So I wore a baseball hat a little too much, and I had this huge clogged foreskin kind of thing on my forehead. It looked like a pencil eraser smack dab in the middle of my forehead. I had it for 2 months with no change. I researched online and found out that with a bottle of Jack Daniels and a few friends, I could use wart freeze-off and might have some luck getting it off. I told my doctor and she laughed in my face. She said, "Good luck with that, let me know how it works out." I took that as a challenge, and just to make sure, I verified there was no major facial nerves that I might accidentally freeze. In the end, it did work better than I thought. I essentially killed all of the cell tissue and it fell off and healed up fine. 10 out of 10 would do it again. To be honest, the narrator was absolutely holding out for one of these that actually went perfectly fine. You should still listen to warnings and consult professionals, audience. But yeah, every once in a while, one of us idiots who tries something dumb will walk away unscathed. I sabered a bottle of champagne and it was pretty epic. I was around 3 or 4 and my sister was about 2, and after watching Barbie Swan Lake before bed, we decided to imitate the scene where Odette jumps the waterfall in the bedroom we shared. Me being the eldest, naturally I went first, jumping from our windowsill onto our bedroom floor. I landed it and felt like a boss, and then came my baby sister's turn. She broke her leg trying to copy me. Needless to say, she can't remember much, although myself and my parents have fond memories of her running around the garden with a neon pink cast. She now claims she got her revenge by pushing me off my scooter when I was 8 and she was 6, and I broke both bones in my arm that time. Unfortunately, I can remember that a lot more and spent a holiday abroad in a bright orange cast. I arrived at a party maybe 15 minutes after they put on Beer Fest in the background. This was right after it came out on DVD. I said I'll try to drink with them. People told me, "Don't do that, they literally had a warning saying not to do exactly that." Punched a hole in the wall, woke up my mother from spewing so loud and crapping my pants. Not sure if there's ever been a "don't try this at home" warning for this particular thing, but it certainly qualifies as something stupid. Now, to set the scene, a bunch of mates and I go camping every year. It's a pretty awesome weekend and we get up to all sorts of stuff. Well, this year, in our drunken wisdom, we decided to shake the hell out of a can of beer, bury it, and then build the fire pit on top. Don't ask me why, we're idiots. So, cut to a few hours later, we've all completely forgotten about our little time bomb ticking away and are all sat around having a good time when the mother of all explosions takes place. We've had the campfire down to a couple of coals for cooking, thankfully, so when the can went off, it only launched dirt, ash, and coal around us, as opposed to what would have happened had we built it up roaring like usual. For about 10 seconds afterwards, it felt like a lot longer, I'm sitting on my butt, dazed and confused, looking around, ears ringing as ash and dust gently tumbles down into the campsite. It felt like a scene out of a war movie. No one was injured and we all have a pretty awesome story to tell now. Still wouldn't recommend anyone tries it at home, though someone most likely will. I ate toilet paper after watching Strange Addictions because she made it look so delicious. My friend had access to dry ice our sophomore year of college from his research gig. We filled water bottles with dry ice and some water and kept them, throwing them and watching them blow up in mounds of Buffalo, New York snow. One of them didn't detonate per se, so I decided to defuse it, instead of detonating as some stranger walks by, and it went off in my hand. Miraculously, nothing more than a few scrapes on my hand and 30 minutes of being deaf in my right ear. I almost made a friend go to the ER while playing WWE. When I was around 11, I started asking my parents and all the other adults I knew if I could have their old electronics to disassemble for fun. All of them thought this was the typical kid disassembles and then reassembles a printer kind of thing that my dad had already done with me several times. Nope. I had blueprints. Very poorly drawn because I was 11. They were for a number of devices I wanted to build. I'd read up on Wikipedia and my dad's old EE textbooks to figure out what materials I needed to build a cutting laser, a microwave flamethrower, an arc welder, and a few other things I've forgotten over the years. As the broken electronics filtered in, computers from the early 90s, defunct DVD players, among others, I slowly acquired all the parts I needed. My mother figured out what I was up to and stopped me shortly before I was about to extract the capacitor from the broken microwave. She was afraid of how much charge the capacitor would store, and it turned out, given my poor grounding safety practices, I likely would have fried myself. Turns out my dad's old textbooks hadn't explained the potential health ramifications for electricity, and for all the math I could do, I was still an idiot. The other, less dangerous stuff would have still been awesome, but I was banned from messing with electronics until I left for college a couple of years later. I have a ton of stories. I wanted to be a stuntman growing up, and my all-time idol was Evel Knievel. Before I knew Parlor existed, I was into jumping from roof to roof at my grandma's house. The houses weren't too far apart. One day I was climbing up to my training area, which used the gate and the side of the wall, and then I slipped and fell and fractured my tailbone. I also received one of those rockets that you launch and it comes down on its little parachute, and my friends and I wondered what would happen if one of us got shot by it. So we took turns shooting at it and each other using a pipe to aim it in our general direction. We were wearing our four-wheeling helmets and safety goggles for safety, and my friend got hit square in the head and survived our amazing stunt. We also tried building an underground base using an old camper shell as a roof, and charged kids money to jump their bikes and whatever over our area of operations if we were in it. I think that was the stupidest thing we really did. Some kid took his dad's four-wheeler and tried to jump over us while we were laying down in it, and it almost crushed us. We were about 9 to 12 years old, and the neighborhood kids would make us feel like rock stars when we rolled on by in our Huffies. Anything they did on gladiators, or at least the best approximation a bunch of 8-year-old kids can construct between themselves. used a crap ton of tannerite on a giant propane tank that apparently had some propane left in it. I have roughly 40% hearing in my left ear and 60% in my right, and degrading because of this. My idiot cousin shot it before I was in the trench and had my hearing protection on. I got thrown into the hole and couldn't hear for days because of the shockwave. His brother got thrown into the hole and was in a medically induced coma for a few days to try to stop brain damage. He's okay, but not 100% anymore. My idiot cousin lost several teeth when I knocked him out a week later in retaliation. He then lost some more when his brother beat the crap out of him too. When did a bro stop a party by trashing the place? Partying at an old fraternity house in college, and in the basement there was a lone PVC water pipe that stretched from floor to ceiling. This room also happened to be the location of the heaviest beer pong table known to man. Late in the night, after copious beers had been consumed, some wise guy decided that the beer pong table needed to be relocated. He proceeds to push the adamantium table up against the wall with some force, effectively shattering the PVC pipe. This is in the middle of winter, so ice-cold water starts spraying in a 6-foot radius out of the pipe, dousing nearly everyone in the room. Girls are crying about their hair and clothes, and the guys are yelling at each other about finding the shutoff valve, which took about 5 drunk minutes to locate. Meanwhile, I'm standing bone dry on the opposite side of the room, drinking a natural light, don't judge me, it was a college, and watching an impromptu wet t-shirt contest. It was a good night. I saw a guy snort a whole Xanax and then throw a pool stick through a flat-screen TV. I don't know if that counts. Oh, don't worry, it does. Well, the Xanax didn't work, I guess. A friend of mine threw a party at his house a few years back. The house was split up into apartments, the first floor being one apartment and the second floor being another. Both floors had a deck out back, one right above the other. I was out in the backyard smoking a cig and talking to someone. I look over to see a few people drinking immediately behind the first floor deck. I happen to look up at the second floor deck to see someone walk out. He proceeds to then whip out his equipment and wee-wee off the back of the deck onto the group of people below. I was at a house party where the token hated roommate immediately got smashed and was stumbling around. He goes into the bathroom for about 30 minutes and then comes out giggling like a madman. He loudly declared that he left an upper decker in his own bathroom. Boy, were his roomies mad, and he thought it was the funniest thing on earth. He didn't find it so funny the next morning when they all but forced him to clean it up the moment he was awake. My God, my money definitely wasn't on someone's party foul being against their own living place. Also, I absolutely hate that upper decker is a common enough thing to become a recognized term. If you don't know what it means, feel free to Google, but for goodness sake, don't use image search. I know a guy that wiped his butt with a nice white face towel in my friend's washroom because he was too lazy to look for TP in the drawers beneath the sink. Also been to several parties where people got mashed and just tore the fricking house up, stealing and breaking stuff for the hell of it. That, to me, is the ultimate party foul. If someone is kind and gracious enough to offer you a roof to get drunk under, snacks, seating, and company, you better damn well leave the place in a relatively good condition. I was at a party in an apartment complex. I stepped out to the backyard for a smoke when I had a powerful urge to go number one. I was already hammered at this point and didn't give an F. I only had one shoe on, for instance, and I found a nice remote corner in which to relieve myself. Now I'm done. I suddenly hear the door to the backyard smash open and hear, "What the frick are you doing?" I zip up and turn around to find the super. Now, this super was already a legend for being a jerk, but that night he was getting ready to hit the town. And being the middle-aged Romanian he is, he had a 70s tuxedo-style shirt on with the buttons down to his chest. He had his hair slicked back and was sporting a huge gold chain, Miami Vice style. I freeze. Think. Just think. I stammer, "No English." "What did you say?" No English. Me no English." I'm Asian, and I'm saying this in my most broken Chinese accent imitation, helped on by untold shots of Jameson. "Where are you from?" "China," says I. "No, you frick. What apartment?" Now my English breaks down utterly, and I'm still just gesturing and pointing and saying stuff like, "My friend, his place, up there." After 5 minutes of this, he glares at me and kicks my butt out of the apartment complex, which is fine except I'm wearing one shoe, don't have my keys, wallet, or phone. I see the super lock the front door and the backyard door. I have no way to contact my friends at this point, so I walk across to the neighborhood bar. The bartender kinda recognizes me. I explain my situation and he just shakes his head and gives me a pint of beer. He lets me use my phone to call my friends, but they're already too hammered to pick up. So I spend the night standing across the street from the apartment building, hiding in the shadows of a tree so that the super doesn't spot me, and waiting for anyone to enter the building so I can sneak in behind him. Later on, my friend tells me the super went around asking everyone if they knew who the whizzing Chinaman was. In short, booze turned me into a one-shoed illegal immigrant. A friend of mine was going wee-wee off the back deck of a cabin into the woods when a girl was stumbling back from said woods. I was standing about 100 feet away and I saw a glorious yellow arc strike this girl on the face and shoulders. She just walked right back to the bonfire like nothing had happened. She may have assumed it was rain because she was really hammered. I told her what happened shortly after so she could clean off that smell. In grad school, a few friends moved into a house together in their second year. The house was a death trap waiting to happen, but that's another story. They threw a party a few weeks after getting their keys, and for some unknown reason, a group of 10 to 12 freshmen had caught wind of the party and just showed up to get hammered. I arrived late to the party with some friends and immediately noticed two things. A, it is a complete sausage fest. All of the freshmen that arrived are male, and B, the faint but very distinct smell of number 2 invaded my nostrils as soon as I opened the door. Not dog do or cat scat, human turd. I guess that's the curse of having a very sensitive nose. I seek out one of the hosts, Will, and he gathers his roommates to make sure no one has clogged a toilet or upper-decked them. All of the bathrooms are clear, yet the smell remains and it's growing stronger. My friend Alice, one of the very few women, figures out that the smell is coming from one of the freshers in the living room that's drunk and dancing with a huge load of crap sloshing around in his undies. Not just a little, a huge saggy bulge that's clearly visible through the kid's khaki slacks. The smell in that room was overwhelming, but somehow none of the freshmen seemed to notice or care. We all just stared at him slack-jawed for a minute before Alice walks up to him and tells him that he may have had an accident. He flips out and bolts out the door, leaving little splotches of brown every time his foot hits the floor. It had run down his pants leg and was just beginning to drip off the cuff when we caught it. I left, they clean up, and kicked out all of the rest of the freshmen. The urinals in my fraternity specifically say flush up, because if you flush down, they flood. And if you flush down and then decide to kick the handle back up to rectify your mistake, there's a biblical torrent spraying in all directions. Many parties have been fouled by this arrangement. A friend of mine hooked up with a guy and then told him she loved him, at which point he avoided her at all costs. The next weekend, she showed up at a party in his dorm, crawled into his roommate's bed, and cried and vomited for 3 hours. Getting her home was a blast. Was at a party once with a friend who had to go number 2. However, the girl that had lived there was occupying the sole bathroom and refused to hurry up. My friend proceeded to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and left a fecal present in the vegetable crisper. You know, the narrator swears that he's been trying to spread out the stories involving bodily emissions like this. However, there seem to be a great deal of them. So please bear with me and understand that I'm cutting out the many gagging noises while I edit this. As some of you know, if you pop the top off a beer bottle with the bottom of yours, all of the beverage comes out. So, is not the correct assumption that you have to drink it all. This one girl goes up to my friend with the right idea and pops the top off of his beer bottle. But I guess she was a little too inebriated and just shatters the entire bottle in my friend's hands. My friend, who is now bleeding, looks up and says, "Oh, my hand's bleeding. Someone get me another beer." My friend did a heroic job of finding a trash can to chuck up in last New Year's. Unfortunately, it was a mesh trash can. A friend was getting angry with the guy who was throwing the party, so when everything calmed down and most people were gone or asleep, he got the butter. He microwaved the butter, then poured the melted butter into a bowl. Then he crapped in the butter carton. Then he poured in the melted butter and let it set in the fridge. Then he left. Maybe the butter didn't look right after, but I don't know because we left. And yes, he got the idea from urban legend. There was this guy on my swim team in college. Super nice guy, but terrible with women. He used to be really shy about changing in front of the rest of the guys in the locker room and would always change under a towel while the majority of the rest of us wouldn't bother. Then one day, the towel drops and we all see that he has a huge member. At first, we were all flabbergasted that this quiet, semi-awkward, prototypical nice guy was so well endowed. No one could keep it to themselves, and pretty soon all of the girls on the team knew about his big secret. At the next big swim team party, after a night of drunken teasing and congratulations, I think he felt emboldened, so in an attempt to distract the other team's opening shot at Beirut, or beer pong, he whips out his equipment and starts spinning it around helicopter style. His spinning member accidentally knocks over all 6 of his team's cups, and they instantly lost. I was having some friends over for dinner, and one of them began to eat his salad with his entree fork. The rest of the party was absolutely horrified. I nearly dropped my monocle. I was at a party in high school at my loaded friend's house. She had a hot tub which a few of us noticed was being seriously underutilized. My friend's widely despised redneck girlfriend got in first, and after I got a fresh beer, I stripped down to my boxers and made my way across the enormous back deck to the flush-set hot tub. As I stepped in, my foot slipped on the smooth fiberglass seat and to the side, right between the redneck girl's legs. I actually felt my big toe penetrate her as I fell into the water. I managed to keep my beer level and above water. As soon as I got my head back above water, she screamed, "My cooter!" I couldn't stop laughing for a very long time, and I still yell that sometimes when I see that friend. I think I redeemed my drunken clumsiness by A, saving my fresh beer, and B, by eliciting such a ridiculous reaction. In short, I slipped into a hot tub, fell in said tub, kicked my friend's girlfriend in the hoo-ha, who screamed, "My cooter!" managed to hold on to my full beer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Watched a girl blow chunks mid-beer pong throw all over the table and then scream, "Chuck and rally!" We all cheered. She was one of the last ones up. At a bar in Liverpool in the UK, I was talking to my girlfriend at the foot of some stairs. Suddenly, a guy fell forward between the stairs right down between us, rolled onto his feet, and walked away without missing a fricking beat. The best part was he was wearing a fur coat, sunglasses, and a hat, carrying a drink, and had a cigarette in his mouth. As he walked away, his drink was unspilt, and his cigarette remained firmly in his mouth. His hat and glasses were similarly undisturbed. Must have been some kind of party ninja pimp. Beat a bunch of jerk dudes at beer pong with a hot girl as my partner. Proceeded to lift her up, with her straddling my waist, and gyrated, quite suggestively, in triumph over the table. I was quite drunk, so I dropped her, and the cups of beer on the tabletop went flying. My friend, when hammered, has a teensy bit of a throwing up problem. He was angry and paranoid one night and started using his geyserous discharges as a projectile to ward off people chasing him from behind. The same night, I was helping him relieve himself of his own chunks in the carpeted hallway of my dorm. A young gentleman shook his head as he passed by, saying, "That's just sick," and continued on to relieve his bladder in the trash can opposite of us. I like my school. I got this. This happened to me. This is a true story. I was having a small party at my apartment, about 20 or so people. Everyone's having a good time, beer pong, Halo, Peter Tosh. Throughout the night, I got pretty flirty with one of the ladies and took her into my room. Son, I was drilling it. The thing is, though, unlike many Americans, I haven't had the snippy operation on my eggplant, and my outer skin tore. Something called the frenulum of prepuce is actually what tore, to be more specific. There was blood everywhere. I ran into the living room, undressed as the day I was born, holding my bloody rooster and screaming for everyone to call 911 because I broke my Johnson. A few of my friends and the girl stayed with me until the ambulance arrived, good friends, and the rest left. The girl was so embarrassed and crying. I remember holding my ruptured eggplant, putting pressure on it, trying to comfort her and tell her it wasn't her fault. Crazy fricking night. I'm a frickin' legend these days. My roommate called my mum and told her I was in the ER, so she showed up concerned. Laughing, the nurse who cleaned the wound was gorgeous and just kept repeating, "I'm so sorry." She later added me on Facebook because apparently I'm a charming mother fricker on Norco. The doctor stitching me up felt it necessary to describe in detail how these kinds of injuries don't usually bleed as much as mine. This is my best and worst put together. My friend had an old Prince Albert scar that he shot bottle rockets out of when he got drunk. One party he was in my kitchen and shot a bottle rocket out of his junk, and it flew right through the living room. It hit my other friend right in the forehead and exploded just as he opened the front door to enter the party. He got a cut on his forehead and was freaked out and angry until we explained, and then he almost died laughing. We sure were young and dumb. In short, my friend shot a bottle rocket out of his Johnson and accidentally hit my other friend in the face with it. To clarify, until Googling just now, the narrator thought that a bottle rocket was a small firework of some sort, and this story had a completely different tone when you think it's a guy blasting pyrotechnics out of his junk, and imagining the scarring that he was causing. This is still a wild story anyway, but it feels tamer now that I know a bottle rocket is powered by compressed air and not gunpowder. Someone stole my only bottle of 2009 Dogfish Head 120-minute IPA from my cooler. This is a highly limited, yearly release beer that costs $10 to $15 for one little bottle, and I was saving it for that night, my birthday. Apparently they didn't like it because the next morning I found it open, but full on the bathroom counter. I was at a party with a girl who I was very interested in, and she was very interested in me. Even though we weren't on a date, we were together, telepathically and ocularly screwing the entire night. The night started with tequila, salt, and lime, a Mexican's wet dream. However, given our underage stomachs, our light statures, and our intolerance to booze, we were prone to disaster. And that's exactly what happened. After about 5 or 6 tequila shots, Alberta and I were feeling rather randy. Excited and youthful, imminent flirting occurred, and I wanted to impress this girl by bringing us more drinks. You know, to show her how manly I am, because I can consume an excess amount of alcohol. We were drinking Rolling Rock bottles in the basement, gathered around a table filled with empty bottles, and recklessly throwing these beers back trying to impress one another. After about 3 or 4, we were indubitably hammered. What happened next will never leave my mind for the rest of my life. Alberta turned ashen, and then like a chameleon, camouflaging itself in a tree, her skin transformed into a green color. She sprayed a fountain of projectile chuck all over myself, the table, and herself in a matter of about 2 seconds. I still remember the taste and smell of her lunch because it sprayed on my face, presumably corned beef on rye. To make matters worse, because she was hammered and embarrassed, she stumbled onto the table, causing an eruption of glass to shatter amidst the ground. Subsequently, she fell into the pile of broken glass, cutting herself worse than a knife-hungry, angsty emo listening to Hawthorne Heights. So now she was covered in blood and spew, and I was standing there sporting her lunch, without the slightest clue of what to do next. Everyone's eyes were on her. Little did I know, Alberta is one of those girls that's extremely sensitive to blood, and even mentioning the word makes her queasy. It didn't help that she had the freaking Seine River of red running down her leg either. Amidst all of this commotion, she fainted on the ground and started to tremble. That's when the worst part happened. She dispersed a freaking chocolate mudslide out of her butt, and it dripped down her legs and onto the ground like a fondue fountain. So, here's this girl covered in spew, bleeding like a fiend, and crapping herself all over the floor of my buddy's house. I helped her up, grabbed her some paper towels and a water, and made sure she was conscious and going to survive. And I dipped the scene faster than Colton Harris Moore evaded the FBI. 3 years have passed, and I haven't seen or heard from her since. Sister came home from a hard night of partying and apparently had taken 4 consecutive shots of Wild Turkey 101 as she was leaving. Minutes later, my brother came bounding out of her bedroom saying, "You've got to see this, dude." We go into her bathroom to find her passed out in the fetal position, 1 foot from the loo, with her skirt, but not panties, pulled halfway down her knees, and a large, firm turd halfway protruding from her undies, resting gently on the inside of her thigh. We then called her boyfriend to come clean up Mrs. Turd Lady. He comes over, cleans her up and puts her to bed, at which point she begins to chuck up all over herself and her white sheets, creating a pink, chunky river leading to the edge of her bed, resulting in a smelly, putrid waterfall. I put a bucket under the waterfall and go to sleep. At a party when I was about 19 with my girlfriend. She got a call from her friend who was on a date and needed to be picked up. I was sober, so my girlfriend and I went to go get her. The friend was hammered and got in the back seat. She started crying about how the guy dumped her after she gave him a down-under kiss and even swallowed. She kept burping and saying, "Oh God, I could still taste him." We drove to the girlfriend's place and her friend rinsed her mouth out with scope and chewed a half-pack of gum. Then the three of us went back to the original party. After a couple of hours, the guy who dumped her shows up at the party. The friend starts drinking even more. After about an hour of this, she goes up to him to try and talk things out. She opens her mouth to speak and she hurls all over him. She was taller than him, so she got his face and chest. My girlfriend yells across the room, "Holy crap, she just snowballed him!" The room got quiet. The guy loses it. He smacked the friend so hard she flew backwards and bounced off the wall. And then he started to kick the wall, and he threw a lamp into the TV and hurled the stereo through the window. All the while, the girls are saying, "Somebody stop him!" But unfortunately, we'd all been told privately that the friend had gone south of the border on him, and we all knew that along with the chunks on him, he had his own baby batter all over his shirt, so we weren't going to touch him. After a couple of minutes, he just left. He got arrested a few hours later at his house, did some restitution and community service, and had the name Chucky Snowball until he went to college. In short, girl goes south of the border on a guy and swallows, and then he dumps her. They met at a party later, she chucks his own splooge back up on him, and he goes berserk, earning a new nickname and criminal record. My friend and I rented a hotel suite to have a New Year's Eve party. We were all set to have an awesome night with about 15 people coming over. One of our friends, we'll call him John Doe to protect the guilty, called the front desk at 8 p.m. and asked them to give a message to us indicating he wouldn't be able to make it to the party. So the hotel manager calls and says the following in broken English. "Are you ready to party? John Doe can't make it to party. No party allowed in room." We had to cancel and sat in the room in disbelief at how our friend just ruined our party by trying to be thoughtful. Have you ever heard of a flaming Dr. Pepper? You pour a shot with amaretto and Everclear, light it on fire, drop it in a Coors Light, and down the whole thing at once. It does taste like Dr. Pepper and is a great way to get smashed. Anyway, I saw a guy spill the shot after he lit it on the tile floor of the kitchen. The frickin' tile floor was on fire, that and he spilled booze. Double party foul. What pranks did you play on your school using the IT computers? Used an altered version of a JavaScript web browser hack that turns all of the pictures shown into pictures of French toast. Rotated monitors 90 degrees in graphics card settings. I did this a lot in primary school until my teachers sat me down for hacking the system and I was almost suspended. My school district used Macs pretty much everywhere. A couple of the most common pranks. There was a key combination that would invert all of the colors on the screen. If I recall correctly, it was the meta keys and 8. It was a lot of fun to do this to someone who left their computer unattended and didn't know that. Then one of the function keys, I think F11, would move all of the windows to the outer edge of the screen, showing the desktop. Pushing it again moved them back, but there was an animation associated with both of the movements. If you held Shift while tapping F11, it would do the same thing but with the animation slowed down. The thing is, it didn't matter if the animation had completed or not, the machine would queue up another action for each time you hit F11, but wouldn't cancel the animation in progress. So, if you were quick enough and someone wasn't paying attention, talking to their neighbor, looking at a book, etc., you could lean over, spam Shift plus F11 a few times, and effectively force them to watch all of their windows slide in and out at a snail's pace for a minute or two. Took the Windows startup sound, edited in 8 minutes of dead air, then edited in 15 seconds of bedroom noises. Made that the new startup sound. Ah, yes. Back in grade 6, this kid decided to write XXX a bunch of times in a Word document, then turn up his volume up to max and have the computer read it out. Cue 24 11-year-olds laughing as his computer yells out a naughty word over and over. Putting an S after the HTTP part in the web address bar. It bypassed the school firewall. I felt like an awesome hacker. My God. You mean that was all that was holding me back from complete browser freedom when my friends and I were just spending all our lunch breaks in the computer lab instead of out in the sun? I feel so cheated. It probably doesn't work anymore, though. I remember at my old school someone managed to disable the H key on lots of the computers. If you were typing and tried to press H, you'd get an error message saying like, "Sorry, but the H key on this computer is currently disabled. Please try again later. The H key is disabled. Type help to fix it." Control, Alt, and directional arrow flipped the screens different directions. I stopped when I was told that I could permanently mess up the computers. And then I started again in college. I did this to a friend and she didn't know how to undo it, so she turned her laptop sideways to Google how to fix it. I did that in grade school. They had to pay a computer technician to come in. He said that there was a virus and it wasn't fixable, and left. I flipped it back the next day. When my school got smaller, more modern monsters, I'd flip the screen upside down, but also turn the monster upside down so it looked normal. Oh, I mean monitors. Autocorrect is a birch sometimes. Unplug mouse from the back of computers 1 and 2. Switch the plugs, but leave the mice where they are. Mouse in front of computer 1 is now plugged into computer 2 and vice versa. Watch the hilarity ensue. IT teachers, those jerks that provide me with job security. We'd take a screenshot of the desktop as it was, then delete all of the items off the desktop, then make the screenshot we took the wallpaper. We'd watch people futilely click on the wallpaper and enjoy. Something else we'd try on occasion, since we were in graphic design class and had access to the necessary programs, besides Paint, was create fake window warning and dialog boxes. We'd make them say things like, "delete computer?" or "delete hard drive?" or something else completely obnoxious like that. Then we'd just remove the "no" option or make both options say "yes." When it was done, we'd add it to the wallpaper that's already on the computer so it looks like there's a real dialog box that's popped onto the screen. This only worked once or twice that I remember. I think we fooled the programming teacher who was really just the baseball coach teaching a class in order to remain as the coach. It's harder to get someone with this one, but it's equally funny. Our school had a standard wrong password 3 times lockout rule. Given the IT teacher was a stone's throw from retirement, he wasn't the quickest. I think we managed 3 lockouts in 1 session. Our school network ran on Windows for Workgroups 3.0. Machines were locked down so you couldn't run your own programs on them. However, we discovered if you put a modified win-ini file that allowed you to install your own programs in a network drive that came before where the lockdown version was stored, it would use that and you could install stuff. And that was my first introduction to Doom multiplayer. Somebody threw a Molotov cocktail into the window of a computer lab at my school. It was over a weekend, thankfully, so nobody was there, but it destroyed all of the computers in the room. My friend and I got blamed for it because the teacher whose lab it was thought that we didn't like her. Which, that's true. Thankfully, our alibi was that we were on a plane flying back from a school exchange trip to Belgium when the damage occurred. There were several teachers on the flight to corroborate our story. That and, plane tickets. I used to play the hidden Excel 97 flight simulator during my boring high school typing class. Joke's on me because I still can't type properly. I rendered all of the school's computers unusably slow for a day by putting hundreds of millions of copies of a picture of a fat frog onto the shared hard drive, filling it completely. If you had the patience to sit there until your computer logged on, you still couldn't save or do anything. Back when the mice had those little tracking balls on the bottom, we'd remove the balls and leave the rest of the mouse. As a side note, does this count as neutering computer mice? Nothing malicious, really, just bypassing the security BS and playing a lot of StarCraft. Soundboards. Holy crap, were we little demons in middle school with those things. My personal favorites were either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Pulp Fiction. When the teacher would ask if there were any questions, from the back of the class you would hear in a thunderous voice, "Who is your daddy and what does he do?" followed by an eruption of laughter. Also following up any time the teacher said, "That's correct," with "Correctamundo." If you're reading this, Miss Jadish, I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Some kid found a way to print from all the computers in school from one computer. So naturally, someone printed 800 copies of a picture of a turd to all the computers in the school. 'Twas known as Brown Thursday. Our IT was crap at our school. If you knew the specific computer number, you could make it shut down only using the Windows command exe. The staff stopped seeing the fun in it when we found the principal's computer number. My middle school, which had Windows XP, had a startup folder from a network share. Except they forgot to remove write permissions for students on the drive. It was a teacher share. We added a startup script to open and close the drive. A couple of days later, every computer in the library was marked as out of order. It's wild to think that I would have gladly done any and all of these and laughed when I was in school, but little crapbags like me were causing absolute nightmares for school's poor IT workers who were just trying to go by one day without kids finding their ways to print butts directly onto the staff room printers. I just put a bunch of strange messages in autoexec.bat. Every time the thing would boot up, you'd get a quote like, "Do not look behind you," or "The package has been delivered. It's in locker number," and then I'd give a random unused locker number. Or something like that would pop up. Also the command, on startup, run paint. On open paint, renders the computer unusable for a 2007 high school IT professional. This probably shows my age, but we'd open BASIC and write a little program that went something like this. 10 lprint you suck, 20 go to 10. Then we'd edit the shortcut to a popular program like Microsoft Word to link to this program instead. When an unsuspecting user clicked to open what they thought was a legit program, instead they'd be treated to the dot matrix printer screeching out, "You suck! You suck! You suck!" forever. The only way to stop it was to find and terminate the program. Powering down the printer and turning it back on again wouldn't do it. My high school had a program on all of the computers that would allow the teachers to watch an entire classroom's screens, take control of them, and send content to them, among other things. A friend of mine came up with an idea to try and use it to prank the classroom, being the genius 16-year-olds that we were. So when my teacher wasn't looking, I put a USB stick into her computer and copied her spy program exe directory onto it to take a look at what was different between the teacher and student versions. Turns out all you needed to make the student version a teacher version was a 25-character license key that was in a plain text file. So obviously, I copied it and upgraded my client to a controller using all of my teacher's settings. We then proceeded to rickroll the classroom on full volume from 34 computers, which was pretty great. At the end of the class, we came up with another great idea. What would happen if we took control of our teacher's computer and messed with her? So we connected to her computer, but she had been watching our screen from her screen. So for about 5 seconds, we see a bottomless pit of our screen in her screen mirrors over and over and over. After about 5 seconds, our PC fans got super loud and then shut off. When we tried to turn it back on, it was a black screen with only a flashing underscore in the top left corner. That PC had to be re-imaged by district tech support. Still not sure what caused that. Me and a friend replaced our computer science teacher's My Computer icon with a shutdown shortcut displaying a "Mwahahaha" message for 3 seconds before turning off the computer. She clicked it 3 times. Wasn't really the sharpest arrow in the quiver. Some guy has been updating a games folder on the school's public H drive. None of the teachers or tech support guys can get rid of it or set it up so that we can't use it. No one knows where it came from except it's been there since forever. It has Counter-Strike 1.6, Day of Defeat, Halo Combat Evolved, a Halo ODST emulator that actually works. I too have questions. Roller Coaster Tycoon, Team Fortress Classic, Doom, KOTOR, Minecraft, Old School RuneScape, Elder Scrolls Morrowind, and a few others. Like a lot of people suggested, I went and looked at the games folder to try and copy it. Much to my dismay and others, the folder is now almost gutted, excluding a proxy program, Halo Combat Evolved, Undertale, and Counter-Strike. I guess they got wise to us. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In 1998, this idiot bought like 5 scanned adult magazines on a floppy disk and decided to open them in computer class. Suspended on the spot. I have no idea what the frick he expected to happen. Guess he was thinking with his hard drive, not his floppy disk, if you know what I'm saying. Well, we moved all of the abacus beads to one side. Yes, I'm older than most Redditors. When I went to school, electricity wasn't invented yet. We used candles to watch TV. I'd always switch the buttons on the keyboards to spell naughty words. I'd discovered a way to disable the teacher's view of my computer. After logging in, I simply unplugged the internet cable that connected me to the school server. The spy program would appear in the toolbar. I'd simply exit the program and reconnect the internet cord. My screen would just appear totally black on their screen. The teacher was kind of impressed I was able to find a way to disable it. She only warned me to not do it again. In 5th grade, I found out you could set words to autocorrect to whatever you want in MS Word. Then Word got out and suddenly half of the words you typed on any computer would autocorrect to "I love D in my butt lololololololol." The teachers were horrified. 4 words. Nicolas Cage Chrome extension. I'd always take the little rollerball out of the bottoms of the mice, guaranteed an afternoon of entertainment every time. We figured out we could make the computer sound like chainsaws by putting a handful of quarters into the CD drive. Then we did it a lot. Shift and print screen to capture desktop, open Paint, Ctrl-V, rotate image upside down and save, set image as desktop background, auto-hide taskbar. On desktop, right-click, view, uncheck, show desktop icons, laugh at random victims attempting to use the computer. This is a combination of 2 of the more common pranks found here, the monitor rotation and the desktop picture replacement. Totally the kind that me and my idiot friends would do and then immediately get caught because we were peeking and laughing over our big box monitors. In 2001, I think, friends and I installed StarCraft deep in my school's file network, accessible on every computer in the building, and we had it programmed to run without a disk. You'd still need a CD key to play, but hacked and false CD keys were really easy back in the day. We passed out false CD keys to those who knew to ask us. And since it was all on the shared network, you could LAN from basically anywhere in the building. This was right around the time when computers were becoming really prevalent in schools. Not just with computer labs, but many classes now had multiple computers or were specifically just on computers. So we'd end up organizing these pretty large StarCraft battles across the school. Even got to the point where, in drafting class, where the teacher absolutely didn't care what we were doing, it even got to the point where my 2 friends and I, massive nerds if that wasn't obvious, would play some of the jocks in the class who loved StarCraft. We didn't just break into the system to have fun, we also broke down barriers to make life better. We also doctored a local newspaper article to look like it was a story about how our principal, who was out on medical leave for back surgery after he fell off a roof, was actually on leave because a gerbil got stuck in his butt, and his wife lit a match to look down the insertion tube to try and see if she could see the gerbil, and the tunnel of methane ignited in a small explosion, giving his butt cavity 3rd-degree burns. The gerbil survived, singed and exhausted, but otherwise okay. We then printed it off and passed it around the school. In hindsight, that was a pretty messed up thing to do. I changed the screensaver from liberal arts by putting an F in front of arts. Oh boy, we pretty much ran the network. It was up or down at our whim. The entire network used hubs, and this was right as routers were becoming a thing, so they weren't yet economical. We'd shut down the entire network with a repeated ping command in DOS set to max packet size. It was far too simple. We wouldn't usually do it for long, just enough for everyone to think it was a hiccup and to see if we could. Our computer class was actually really awesome. The assigned modules were easy, and once we were finished, our teacher would let us do our own thing. Turns out, our school had an entire computer graveyard. We'd go in there, find parts, and build entire computers. Eventually, we had a separate network of 8 or 10 machines that we used exclusively for Quake 2 and the original Halo. One day, the school came in and removed our separate gaming computers. We were angry. The network was down for quite some time. So, computer class for most of grade school was nothing more than endless typing classes. She sells seashells by the seashore and other tongue twisters to get us practicing home rows and typing quickly. Absolutely mind-numbingly dull. Sure, getting to play Commander Keen or Wolfenstein after was nice, but the reward was nowhere near worth the effort to reach it, and the teacher would constantly get frustrated with me ditching home rows and finishing faster and more accurately without them. So one day, with us both being frustrated with each other, I restarted the computer and opened the BIOS setup utility and started changing random settings to random values. Yes, I was a vindictive child. Yeah, I was a typing pro due to my online gaming habits back in middle school, like StarCraft, Diablo 2, Warcraft 3, the others. I got my teacher into a deal that if I could accurately finish the entire course curriculum in 4 classes, then I could play Oregon Trail for the rest of the year. A lot of settlers died from dysentery that semester. To the dumb student who tried to mess with the school computers by shoving paper into the CD tray, don't use paper with your class schedule, full name, and ID number on it, idiot. I did that on purpose. And that teacher didn't have my name or ID number on it. You fell for a classic one. I never did anything to damage computers, just circumvent security measures. Using standalone browsers or games from a flash drive, using said browsers or proxies to get around web filters, installing programs and games in the C-root directory, since most group policy or other security measures wouldn't stop something from executing from there. Finally, I can contribute. I was in college, in a classroom, waiting my turn to an exam, which was held in another room. Bored out of my mind, behind me was a PC. I saw a red button that said 220. I say out loud, "What does this button do?" and press the button. The button now says 150 and a loud bang and smoke comes from inside the PC unit. I'd turned the PC power supply from 220 volts to 150, which toasted it. The room was full with my colleagues. Everyone looks at me in disbelief. I begin to laugh out loud, not believing what just happened. Luckily, nobody told on me to the professor, who was a pretty grouchy guy. I managed to install Linux on almost 90% of all computers at the school at once. There were several flaws in the network that I discovered over the years that let me essentially ruin, to the IT department at least, over 110 of their machines. Firstly, since these were mostly Macs, I was able to abuse their poorly configured guest account system to gain screen sharing access to any Mac that was currently logged in, regardless of the account that was currently in use. Second, the IT department set up some sort of program that would read a script file, then update the Macs according to the file via single user mode, I think. I modified one of the update scripts to a Linux image instead of an OS X update. I can't remember what I did, but I think there were specifically modified images that will install a default system state silently, requiring no user input other than the parameters for the disk partition when being run in the command line. That somehow worked. So essentially, the next scheduled update completely messed the school by installing an OS that nobody knew how to use. It was glorious, and apparently it was cheaper to toss the Macs and buy new ones than pay the IT department to actually reinstall OS X by hand. Whatever, I got a ton of free Macs that day. Unexpectedly good outcome. I think it was in 2004, my IT teacher let me use an old laptop for a project. Inside it was a floppy disk with the username and password for all users on the learning platform we used, including teachers. The rest of the semester I logged into the teachers' accounts, found the hand-ins from the best students, downloaded and made it my own, and handed it in from my own account. Never got busted, but I realized I used almost the same time altering assignments as I could have if I just made my own. Also had some fun with the Let Me Rule Trojan from time to time. You people are what prevents me from being able to finish my coffee in the morning. Damn you all. Not school, but many years ago when I was a hapless little bag of crap, I was walking by a couple of computers in one of those "we sell anything" cheap stores. There was one on an end cap, it was running 95 or 3.1, I can't remember. So I logged out, opened DOS and said, "Format C," and walked away. I'm sure I've paid for it over the years in karma. My friend and I entered into the operating system itself a virus that would essentially hunt through email accounts with .edu addresses, so all teachers and admin, and display a picture of 2 women doing the deed. If the operator clicked more than 10 times, a video started. If the operator clicked more than 20 times, the noise started. The only way to get rid of it was pretty simple: Control-Alt-Delete and use taskbar to shut it down. Not that complex, obviously. Although, to be honest, I didn't do a lot of programming. I did some of the basics, however. I mostly did the strategic planning of how we were actually going to get it done and implement it. My friend's dad was a programmer and a hobbyist hacker, so he actually helped my friend design it. I still find it hilarious that his dad was willing to screw with the teachers. He must have really hated our school a lot. However, most teachers didn't know that. They didn't know who did it, but it was hilarious. Which cool job is actually lame and boring? Oh my gosh, build a bear. The weirdest and most frustrating thing. Granted, I didn't make it a super long time in the job, and seeing kids happy is great, but they're really strict and the bad times get pretty bad. That store is just parents with sticker shock trying to talk their kids into cheaper options. You go in to do the little $35 bear and walk out $150 later with a bear in a full tuxedo with a skateboard and a construction helmet, so people are just kinda angry at you when you work there. I'm a forensic scientist, and it's literally the only thing people ask me about on dating apps. It's very technical work, and it's extremely routine. Oh my god, same. I'm an archaeologist, and I imagine we have very similar conversations. Usually, when I meet people, I avoid the topic at this point because the pressure is on me to drive the energy of the conversations with the exciting 3% of what I do while avoiding too many technical terms. It's kind of deflating to see how quickly people go from 100% to zero interest because of my explanation. Preschool teacher, especially with the new COVID-19 regulations. Have you ever tried social distancing 3-year-olds? Barnes & Noble. Your job has literally nothing to do with books, and it obviously attracts a lot of that type, myself included. Park ranger. Don't get me wrong, I loved it, but a lot of days it was less talk about cool animals while wearing your ranger hat, and more, the toilets are overflowing again, go clean the septic tank filter and stir the tank with a shovel. With a little bit of, hey, there's a crazy guy on Crystal down by the bridge, can you convince him to leave without murdering anyone? All for the low price of $26,000 per year with a college degree. I hate the idea that this comment might dissuade anyone else from becoming a park ranger. These jobs are so varied, and I just happened to work for an underfunded agency with too few staff. Honestly, I still loved the job and would have kept doing it forever if a higher-paying outdoor environmental job hadn't pretty much fallen into my lap. Being a park ranger taught me so much, and most importantly, I got trained as a wildland firefighter, which is still my favorite part of the job. If you've always dreamed of being a park ranger, please go for it. Yeah, I was thinking that if you got far away enough from any major cities, you could at least avoid the people who are just traveling out there to do substances. And then if you're really in the wilderness, they'll just get eaten by bears. Winning. Professional photographer. Not like hobbyist, but business-owning photographer. Sucks the love right out of your work. Because you started the business to take pictures, but then Karen doesn't like the way she looks in one of them, so she wants the whole set for free, plus a reshoot for free, plus those images for free. Then the 2 high school kids getting into a very ill-advised marriage at exactly 18 years old wants to book you for their wedding, but their budget is only $50. Then that Karen calls back because she now loves your work and wants to pay for another shoot, but only if you agree to do her friend's daughter's destination wedding for free. Then you get a call from your last bride. It's been 2 weeks since their wedding. Where the frick are her pictures? Then you get no leads from a bridal expo. Then a client finds out you don't support their political candidate and tries to take you to court to get their money back. Then some Insta thought who thinks she's influencing people offers a collab where you take professional photos of her and she adds a crappy Insta filter to it and claims her friend took them. And she's not going to pay. And then you get some entitled mum who wants you to photograph every day of her newborn's first year of life for $100. I just went back to being a hobbyist in the end. I do closed captioning. While I joke that, yes, I get paid to watch TV, it's actually very tedious. And if you don't actually enjoy the programming, you're being forced to watch something you don't care for. Or worse, it's something I do enjoy like a long-form drama. We usually chop those up into 15-minute increments and split between everyone, so I only see chunks and not always even in order. It actually ruins the show for me. We tend to get a lot of complaints from hearing-abled people who don't understand captions were mainly intended for the hard of hearing and deaf, so hopefully you get to read my captions and the viewing experience is still just as enjoyable for you. Working in a flower shop. It's just like any other retail job, but people constantly tell you how fun your job must be. Also, helping grieving families choose funeral flowers isn't fun. I'm a marine biologist. I spent the last week measuring defrosted fish heads. Well, I'm a scientist. I don't know if people usually think of that career as fun, but I think people think it's a lot more eureka and less, this data has to be manually processed for 600 hours before I can analyze it. Yep, as a bioscientist, it's never really eureka and much more, are my cells dead? Are my fruit flies okay? Are they going to fix the microscope? Will the microscope ever be free to book? Is 6 coffees too many? And a large part of my day is just spent doing tasks I need to keep my work running, like making buffers, sorting fly stocks, splitting cells, and cleaning things. And yet, I miss my lab whenever I'm not there. Not a specific job, but traveling for work. I'm in tech, and a lot of people starting out talk about wanting to go to customer sites and get out in the field. I love to travel for fun, but it's hard to fit in the fun stuff when you have presentations and stuff to worry about, and a lot of times your customers aren't in the fun cities anyway. I also think I prefer the stability in day-to-day schedule of traveling less frequently. Had a colleague who complained and whined that he was so jealous until he hit the road and quit after less than a year doing that. Yeah, I get to go to some amazing places, but more often than not, I was in a crappy hotel in a crappy location. Even in great places, your colleagues or customers go home to their families, and as much as I love exploring alone, it does get lonely. Yes, my tiara hurts my head, wah wah. I finally stopped when I got assigned a new and fairly attractive destination, and all I could think of was, ugh, how long is that flight, and can someone else do it? I sure miss my exec platinum airline status, though. TV and film production. I think most people dream of being the actor, the director, and the people making the creative decisions, or the big shot producer calling the shots, but most of the people working in TV and film production are part of a machine, the grind, working in a system, trying to climb up to wherever they want to be. Many don't get to actualize their creative vision. Also, the industry can be project-based, which means job security concerns, and location-limited to New York, LA, and maybe a couple of other cities. The pay can be low starting out too, though it can be good if you work your way up. But I did enjoy the type of people that work these jobs, a little more fun than the business folk I work with now. I have a lot of respect for the TV and film industry. I'd go back to it, but I'd be careful about what the job and career path was. Okay, so not necessarily bad, but beekeeping. You gotta get used to the constant sound of buzzing during hive inspections and swarm removals, plus wearing that protective suit in hot weather for hours on end, give or take the situation. Also, there appears to be a large number of beekeepers allergic to bees, so EpiPens are a must. Photography. I burnt out after a few years. You realize how weddings are so cookie-cutter, no matter how original the couple thinks they're being, or the religious segment they're attached to. The crappiest one has got to be the couple who refused to honor the contract and didn't pay me after their wedding. Naturally, I held their photos until payment was made. They tried suing me for not delivering their photos because apparently the 50% deposit was enough. Frick that. Took it to court and the Justice of the Peace, this is in Canada, ordered him to pay. Wasted a day and $400 to file the case. It really annoyed me for a long time since I met this couple at a church I used to go to. We even all hung out with the other church friends prior to it. Years later, this jerk and his wife were found to be running an illegal puppy mill. He tried discarding one of the puppies at a plaza shopping mall by throwing it into a garbage can. The puppy was inside the garbage can and crying, and people heard it and rescued it. Security cameras caught and ID'd the guy clear as day. Police raided his house and found he had a bunch of animals in unkempt conditions, and the whole house smelled like crap. When you Google his name now, you find all of this. Pure karma. That well-deserved karmic blow towards these garbage people aside, this is our second story about photography. I've met equal number who've done it as their trade for many years and seem to love it, and hate it, and stories like this one just seem to repeatedly run into the worst crappy cheapskates in the world. My heart goes out to you hard-working camera jockeys. A pediatric nurse. Being a nurse for children and adolescents. Everyone in nursing school talks about how much they want to work with kids. The reality is that a pediatric nurse sees more cases of the worst sort of brutal parents and neglect than any other specialty. Doesn't matter where you are in the pediatric hospital, it's the thing you see most. I've seen so many DCS, which is the Department of Child Services, caseworkers that I've gotten to know some of them and become acquaintances with them. Sure, working with kids and adolescents is great, but people don't think about the most essential piece of that puzzle, which is their families. It doesn't matter how good of care you give to those kids, if you don't loop the parents into that care, you may as well just not be doing anything for them. I always say the more fun it is to go somewhere, the worse it is to work there. Like amusement parks and arcades. Honestly, every job that lots and lots of people really want to do sucks, mostly due to supply and demand. You're going to be treated like crap, and if you complain, you're going to be fired, because you're inherently replaceable because there's thousands of people that would love to do your job for even less money than you're making. I tried to explain this to my father when I was going to accept a bartending job at minimum wage. He said I should at least demand $15 an hour, and I told him they'd laugh me out at the bar and find some college student willing to work for less than minimum wage. The fact I'd be getting minimum wage was because I knew the bartenders and owner, so I would have started out at a higher position than just entry level. I didn't want to bartend, it was just a guaranteed job with people I knew right after I graduated. It was more than I had otherwise, and I was easily replaceable for cheaper. Baker. Coming into work at 3 or 4 a.m. so you idiots can have 6 a.m. baked goods is miserable. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Demolition. Everyone wants to break stuff with a sledgehammer. Everyone's tired of lifting that same sledgehammer after 5 swings. Nobody wants to load the broken stuff into bags or a wheelbarrow and take it to a dumpster. I did a 2-week demo job years ago where I had to use a 75-pound jackhammer to destroy a concrete slab and grind rebar into pieces. I'm in good shape, and that job messed me up. Video game testing. I've been working in the game industry for 6 years now and teaching for 2. Testing video games is thought of to be, oh, you just play games all day? But it's actually very specific and arduous. First of all, there's a bunch of testing methodologies such as load and soak testing, white room testing, version testing to name just a few, but the most common one is functionality testing. Functionality testing is, so if I walk into a corner with the rifle in my inventory, I can clip through the wall, but if I have the sawn-off in my inventory, I don't clip through. Paleontologists. You don't get to work with full dinosaur skeletons and do all kinds of awesome expeditions. You're mostly sitting at a desk looking at some pictures and logging stuff on your computer, maybe examining a fossil occasionally. If you're lucky, you can go on a real dig and, oh my god, spend hours in the hot sun dusting off rocks. Working in an animal shelter. For sure, it's probably less intense than zookeeping, but the amount of people who apply or volunteer expecting to come in and play with cute puppies all day is absurd. We're basically animal maids. You deal with animals of all sorts of behavioral and developmental stages, crapping and weeing everywhere, and you look over and this one fricking dog named Chumbawamba is sitting in his water bowl, so you've got to fill that up 6 times and dry his kennel out, and then you go and mop up the cat room. Around 10 kittens just want to eat your mop, and also 4 kids are just yelling that something has spewed up on the floor and I must clean it, now. Not to mention all the extra behind-the-scenes work that the public never sees. How in the summer, during kitten and puppy season, the shelter built to house 500 animals has 750, and I didn't take lunch or sit at all for any of my shifts for the past 6 days. How the courts force us to put down animals that we know can be rehabilitated, but we don't get enough funding to fight it. How animal control just showed up with the 4th pregnant stray of the week, but intake is full and even double-stacked in some cases, so your co-worker fosters the cats in their own house. Not even to mention the crappy fricking people who do dumb crap and end up getting scratched or bitten, and the animal is the one who bears the consequences for that. I'm the proudest shelter worker in the world. I adore my job even at its hardest. I didn't sit for 9.5 hours today, and I found a cat turd in the cuff of my jeans. But it doesn't matter because a bonded pair of adult cats got adopted today. I took 6 applications this morning, and the cat in Bank 4 with the goopy eye is already looking better, and we sent a mama out to foster. The hard work is always worth it for these babies. Listen, I know it was just an aside in your story, but I really want to hear more about Chumbawamba. Alright. Chumbawamba was this silky-coated black and brown hound mix. He was super gangly and tall and had these big old ears and was a very good boy. But every fricking day, without fail, he'd flip his water bowl even with a non-tip bowl. So he gave him a heavier, deeper bowl. Every day, at least 4 times a day, Chumbawamba got this enormous, heavy-bottomed water bowl filled. It held close to a gallon of water. It weighed about 10 pounds empty and was too heavy for me to even really lift when full. "Oh," thought Chumbawamba, "I cannot flip this big bowl. It's too heavy." But Chumbawamba was an innovator. Instead of just flipping the bowl, he said, "What if I got rid of the water? Then I'd be strong enough to flip it." So there goes Chumbawamba diving front paws first into the bowl and essentially digging the water out until it was empty enough that he could flip it. He was a big, thirsty dork and I loved him, even though he super annoyed me when he dumped his bowls. Accountant. Everyone thinks it's all fun and number crunching, but the constant stream of women throwing their undies and wanting to bear your children is honestly exhausting. You can't fool us, commenter. We all know you're just trying to keep us away from your cool, rad job and the lifestyle that's basically just one tier below Kardashian on the sweet grift factor. We're getting our CPAs and coming for your cushy, party-filled gig. Being an extra in a movie. Now, it can be super fun. I especially love historical and post-apocalyptic or sci-fi fantasy type stuff, but a typical day on set wasn't what I thought it'd be when I started doing it. Often we have to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to get to holding, and if you're a minute late to check in, sometimes they'll just kick you out. Then we sit around in holding with sometimes hundreds of other extras, and we're usually sitting there for a good 3 or 4 hours before they start telling us to get ready to film. During this time, we go through a long wardrobe period, hair and makeup lines where they reuse clothes unless you bring them yourself, brushes and makeup without washing them. When we finally get to film, it's often the same mundane motions over and over, exceptions of course, and those are always fun. Then we either get shuffled around or go back to holding. Several more hours pass, we go film again. Hungry? You get lunch 6 hours after your call time and a usually meager supply of snacks. In between takes, it's more standing around, often in heat or rain, or you'll get shuffled into cramped spaces to wait. Days on set are often more than 12 hours, and I know someone who had to be on set for 26 hours straight. They can legally hold you there until they declare filming is done, so don't make plans for the next day. Not to mention that you rarely see yourself in the final cut. I'm not trying to bash other background actors or the film industry because I've met lots of cool people and gotten to do some pretty awesome things. For example, interacting with main characters in scenes, running around in the woods with fake weapons, or being a zombie. But when I did my first job as a teen, I definitely thought it would be a lot different. And I'm not part of the SAG union. Extras who are part of that do indeed get treated better with more perks. Also, it may be different in Hollywood. I've only worked in Georgia. I've also been a stand-in, and I like that a lot better because you're treated as the crew rather than, well, as an extra. Flight attendant. You're on call, on reserve, forever, and have a terrible schedule, have no life, and make no money for the first 5 to 10 years. And while you work for peanuts, you can't afford to use your flight benefits in any substantial way. Then, when you finally get a chance to use your benefits for a trip, you have to fly standby, which means you aren't guaranteed to get on the flight that you want. And then, if you do make it out of town, you'd better have like a week off so you can make damn sure you're back in your base city in time for your next work shift. Did I mention that there's an act of US legislation, the Railway Labor Act, that allows airlines to exploit so you don't get paid for certain work hours that you actually need to be working? For example, flight attendants don't get paid for boarding or any time the plane is at the gate. Worst job ever. Google Street View driver. You're all alone for more than 8 hours a day, can almost never take a break, need to be constantly on and focused lest you crash the 25 grand Subaru with the 60 grand worth of camera equipment in it. You end up becoming an amateur meteorologist to keep track of weather patterns and cloud cover, and in my experience, there are a lot of people who just get insanely angry at you, at Google, and the job in general for a wide variety of reasons. I enjoyed myself when I did it, but it was nowhere near as glamorous or fun as I or my friends or family assumed. The pay? $15 an hour, but contingent on hours driven, which were themselves dependent on clear weather to ensure optimal image clarity. Why not drive every day no matter the weather? Well, Google got around this problem by making you redrive routes whose pictures turned out subpar. To prevent people double billing by driving the same easy route constantly, you also had a weekly quota of unique miles driven, so no double dipping. What could you do in the car? As long as the camera and mapping software was running properly, I was on my own. I listened to music, the news, and lots of books on tape. I could stop for short bathroom breaks whenever I felt like it, and I had an hour guaranteed for lunch whenever I wanted to take it, which usually amounted to eating in the car on the side of some lonely rural road 90% of the time. Who would ever think this was fun or glamorous? All I can say is back in 2012, most people I talked to were pretty excited, myself included, about getting the chance to do any work with Google, let alone this cool new project that would let you see what any place on Earth looked like at street level from the comfort of your home. This was the era of Google Plus being a potentially exciting new thing, and of Google Glass being the future of tech, and overall it was a different time. That's why everyone I knew thought it was a cool gig. Being a character performer at Disney. Don't get me wrong, there are some amazing perks and truly magical moments. I know I'm super lucky and tons of people would love to be in my shoes, but the day-to-day work is exhausting in ways I never thought possible. Guests can be truly awful. I've had things said and done to me I never would have imagined. The company isn't always great, it highly depends on your leadership. And there's so much focus on your body and face, good and bad focus, that it can be incredibly depressing and difficult emotionally. Plus, you have to accept that there's very little upward mobility. Most people grow out of it, and it's rough to know that one day you'll get too old or too fat, and you'll have to start all over in a new career field. So you're either constantly thinking about what you're going to do when you leave, or how you're going to keep yourself there. I personally knew it would be temporary, and now I only work there seasonally while I have a normal career. But Disney has a way of sucking you in. Being a writer, I always thought it was my absolute dream job. But the only job I could get after college was working in a content mill as a blog writer. I used to work 70-hour weeks staring at the computer in the basement of an old bank writing bullcrap articles about the dangers of mold, fence cleaning, and why you need a commercial awning, and the dream turned into a nightmare. While I still write occasionally, I'm now working as a communications person, so it's a bit less heavy. Which brat put you off having kids forever? Walked past that play area in the mall. The sound was deafening. I'm convinced that the boy who cried wolf was made because kids love to scream bloody murder for no reason. In 8th grade, I had to take care of a robot baby. The first night I had it, the damn thing woke me up at 2 a.m. screaming as loud as it could. My mum heard this and came into my room. All she sees is me cradling this robot, not knowing what to do and freaking out, basically crying myself. My mum takes the baby into her room and starts cradling it until she thinks to herself, "What the frick am I doing?" She then proceeds to wrap the baby in a series of blankets and puts it in her closet for the rest of the night. I myself would proceed to do this every night until the assignment was over. F that robot. That was 8 or 9 years ago, and I still don't want any kids. Anytime a child throws a tantrum in public? Yeah, be a good parent. If a kid throws a tantrum, well, we're going home now. Easier if both parents are there in a restaurant. One takes the crappy child to the car, the other pays the bill and gets the food to go. In a mall or something, you just walk out. Kids eventually learn to shut up and get over it. When I had to ride in a car for 45 minutes with my little sister and a 5-year-old she was babysitting. For the entire ride, the kid screamed, pausing only to take a breath or giggle. It took 10 years, but I kept the promise I made that day and got sterilized. No regrets. All day, every day, I work as a teacher. There is a saying or proverb in Polish that you use to wish a misfortune on someone. I wish you to get to teach other people's children. I'm the youngest of a slew of co-workers in a small office. My biggest turn-off for having kids someday is them complaining or talking about them 24/7. If they're such a hassle, it really doesn't seem to be worth the time and money investment in raising them. One day, one of them said, "Oh, don't worry, when you have kids someday, they'll be all you talk about as well." Yep, screw that. Misery loves company, I guess. For the record, the narrator, after seeing the best and worst of these little monsters, still thinks they're worth a shot. But yeah, a lot of people just seem to really do nothing but complain about their kids. I remember my dad asking 8-year-old me if I wanted kids. My reply was, "No, because I don't want kids messing up my house like we mess up yours." When they scream. Fricking monsters. Anything larger than a cat should not be physically capable of making noises above 1 to 1200 Hz. At that point, that creature is a banshee from folklore and needs to be silenced. When I was doing one of those "what do you want to be when you grow up" things in school, and realized after someone asked why I never factored kids in there. As a girl, that's totally what you're supposed to do, right? I could never come up with an answer as to why I never factored having kids into that plan because, simply enough, I didn't want them. I was about 10 then, and I'm 26 now. I still don't want kids, and I don't think I'll ever change my mind. Every single time I walk by an obviously pregnant person, I never want my body to do that. Hard nope. I made the decision when my mother, who's an OB-GYN, sat me down at about 18 and told me that having children was the worst decision she ever made. I'm a lot like her, and I could see myself repeating the same patterns of behavior that negatively affected my own life with whatever spawn I might have. I actually really respect her for being honest with me and not perpetuating the "having children is your purpose and miracle" fallacy. Now I'm nearly 30 and I don't want kids. I'm not sure I'll ever feel ready to give up my lifestyle. I have all the freedoms of an adult and the responsibilities of a teenager. If I want to spend my day off getting drunk or spend my last tenner on brunch, that's what I do. I have a disposable income and disposable time. Also, now that I have cancer, I'm off work full-time, and if I want to nap, I can nap. I don't have to worry about keeping my crap together for the kids. It's such a weight off knowing that I only have to worry about my needs right now. I wouldn't mind dating someone with kids though. I could be the cool stepmom on the weekends. Part-time parent. My revelation came babysitting my niece. At the time, my brother worked swing shifts and his wife worked overnights. So occasionally I'd have to babysit from 10 to midnight, and my niece was always asleep. It was basically get there and watch TV for 2 hours or nap. It was nice. Then one day it all went to hell. The person who would have taken over for my brother called off, and he couldn't get off work till 8 a.m. And his wife didn't come home till later than that. 12-hour shifts and drive time. I couldn't stay all night like that as I had work at 7 in the morning. Then my niece woke up. I love my niece, but it was past her bedtime. She was 5 at the time. She started screaming, not in pain, not in anger, just screaming to scream. At that point, their dog got overly excited and was jumping around. I had a girl screaming and a dog running around and barking. Then my brother calls to tell me he'll be home at 4 and I tell him Katie's up. While I'm on the phone, I've got Katie screaming in my ear and the dog biting my arm, and I'm doing everything I could to keep the dog away from the niece, as if he bit her, it would just make my life worse. I gave the phone to my niece and my brother tells her to go to bed, and she starts throwing a tantrum. She goes up to her room, and for the next hour, I hear the sounds of things smashing, being thrown around, and it sounded like a fricking war room. Then it quieted down. I went up there and she was sleeping on the bed, and there were broken toys, ripped up books, dents in the wall, things knocked over, clothes everywhere. I decided I didn't want kids after that. I have a dog. He doesn't bark and just lays around. This is a good life. In an economics class I took in high school, we were assigned to pretend that we were 10 years older and create a budget that would let us live off $2,000 a month. We were allowed to live anywhere, use whatever method of transportation we wanted. I decided I wanted to live in the mountains, somewhere with cheap rent, and I'd ride my bike around the small mountain town. The rest of the budget went to savings or buying cool crap I'd want, like video games. I handed in my project and my teacher tells me I have to do it again because I didn't include a wife and children. I asked him why I had to get married, and he just looked at me like I was stupid. I mean, it sounds terrible, but my nephew made me realize I want to stay child-free. I know he was a baby, but he was the most pitiful kid ever. He'd cry over anything. I don't have the patience for that, and I never will. Everyone says, when it's your kid, it's different. No, I'd still be annoyed and there won't be a my kid. I mean, that sounds like a pretty harsh way of thinking about a baby, but at least you know it isn't for you, and you can put your energy into something else, like hobbies, partying, or paying people on the internet to send you bottles of their bathwater. The narrator is still waiting for his first offer on that last one. I'm a 23-year-old girl. I've had plenty of these. In fact, I can't recall ever having had an I want to have kids moment. I'll list the most trivial reasons first. I don't like the idea of enduring hours and hours of excruciating pain only to push a watermelon-sized object out of my hoo-ha and to have it begin to spew and crap all over me. I don't like the idea of postpartum depression or losing my figure. It's hard enough to keep my tummy tight, thank you. Or worse, of being obligated to never spend any of my money and time on myself, ever. Which is the sentiment I get from my friends who are mothers. They don't get a minute to themselves. But apparently they love it. They love being a mum. They have some sort of maternal instinct that I don't have. I guess that makes all of those things I listed seem like selfish reasons not to have a kid, and that's cool. I'm happy it means something for them, and I might even think their kids are cute in a passive sort of way, but the idea of having one myself is just not appealing. I worked in retail. Once when I used to be a cashier, I was ringing up a lady's stuff, and I remember being fairly sure something was seriously wrong with her kids, like they needed professional help. They were red-faced, screaming, and just saying the worst possible crap you could say. I don't remember what, as it was more than a year ago and I kind of blocked it out. She kept trying to discipline them at first, appropriately, telling them to knock it off and there'd be no TV when they got home, and she's taking their toys away, whatever. I could also tell she really wanted to just leave, get in the car, we're going home, move. But she also really needed the stuff in the cart, mostly food for them, several $100s worth of it. She didn't have the energy to go through this again. At some point during the transaction, she just gave up. I could see it in her eyes. She just didn't care any more about shutting the little frickers up in this moment. I didn't blame her. She was tired. I'd never seen anyone that looked so tired, so listless. As she was trying to swipe her card, her 6-year-old grabbed it out of her hand, looks at her with vacant eyes, and throws it on the floor. She briefly went through the motion of trying again, and he climbed up on the cart and grabbed it again and threw it. They're all screaming like they're being kidnapped. Over the noise in the background, the deafening cacophony of these 3 inhumane creatures, she yelled an apology to me at the top of her lungs and tried once again to swipe her card. The kid knocked it out of her hand, and she burst into tears. Finally, when she managed to pay, she just turned around and left the store with the cart full of crap she brought these undeserving little brats because she had to, not because she wanted to. She looked so ashamed of herself. Not of them, but of herself. She didn't want to be there because she didn't want people to know how tired she was or the extent of what she puts up with. She didn't want people to know that the strength she had to swipe her card at the very end was the last iota of strength she had left in her at all. She cried silently as the little frickers continued to scream all the way out the door. I think that was the moment where I went from, I don't really want kids right now, to, I'm never having kids, not now, not ever. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I renew my vows literally every time my coworker complains of how little sleep or money or time he has. I just looked around and felt that the world already had a sufficiency of children. Why add another one when we are already well over the quota for population density in my area? Also, we don't make enough money to support a child the way I'd like to. Growing up poor was not pleasant for me, and I wouldn't want to make someone else do it. I'd rather save up and chip in for another promising kid's college who doesn't have the money than spend all that money doing financial stability for my own personal child. Just seeing how kids turn out. I feel like I'd be too hard on my kid. Well, not hard, I'd just want them to be a super good person and care about people in general. I have 2 friends. One babies his son to an extreme, so much you can see it's hurting the kid developmentally. The kid baby talks and can't do anything for himself and scream cries when the toilet flushes because he's terrified. The guy just coddles and babies this kid, and if anyone points out how behind the kid is, the guy says, "Sorry, I'm just being a good dad." Being up your kid's butt all the time babying him doesn't mean you're some super dad. Another guy I know had a little girl and they spoil her rotten, and she's selfish and expects everything handed to them. I'd just set way too high standards and I wouldn't be able to say, okay, they're just a kid. I've never had an I want to have kids moment. Since I was a kid myself, the idea of having them strongly repulsed me. When I found out what an episiotomy was, and then again when I heard there were degrees of tearing, don't Google 4th degree tears. Just don't. Because I know that if my kid pushed me too far, I'd resort to corporal punishment. Nothing I wouldn't want done to me, but that's still not really societally acceptable. Plus, they absorb a ton of time, money, and life. I don't have time for that. I wouldn't sacrifice what my parents did for a person like me. Well, I can't sympathize with being able to think I'd do that to a kid, but I guess it's better to know that and not have kids than not realize it until it's too late. My God. My long-term boyfriend told me he didn't want kids about 1.5 years ago, and for a couple of months I convinced myself he'd change his mind when we got a little older and more established. Then his cousin had a kid. I'll never forget waking up hungover as frick to that baby screaming bloody murder, neither parent there to take care of it. My boyfriend's cousin went to the store without warning either of us, and that poor kid needed a diaper change. I could barely pick him up without gagging from the smell, and I nearly strangled the cousin when he finally got back. Then I realized how drastically my life was going to change if and when I had kids. No more parties, no more vacations, especially once they were in school, no spending money on whatever I wanted. Call me selfish, I don't give a frick. Hearing the horror stories from multiple people about the little hellion my boyfriend was as a small child, and remembering what a jerk I was starting from about 11 years old and continuing through my late teens, helped seal my resolve in the matter. As if all that wasn't enough, I briefly considered being a surrogate until I heard the gosh-awful birth stories from my mum and future mother-in-law. Tearing from my V to my A doesn't sound pleasant. Then I read some internet stories about childbirth and decided I didn't want to be a surrogate anymore. I wouldn't be a good mum, I'm not good with kids and they stress me out. I'm selfish and I would likely end up regretting having kids, which would make me feel like a terrible person. Plus, I love sleeping in, and I have a bad habit of being pretty mean if someone or something wakes me up before I want to get up. Like I said, I'm selfish and I don't give a frick. Now, anytime I'm around children or listen to my friends talk about life with children, I think to myself, F that S. When I finally realized how miserable having children would make me, it was like a huge weight was lifted off my chest. I felt so free, and I wouldn't change that feeling for anything. My little brother is about 12 years younger than me. I've learned firsthand from him. I discovered right this fricking minute. I've been taking care of my sister-in-law's granddaughter while her daughter is in the hospital for minor surgery. I regret every fricking second of it, and I detest myself for trying yet again to be a nice guy. First off, the sister-in-law is a horrible fricking witch, and I knew her daughter carried forth a lot of her mother's bullcrap characteristics, but my fricking god, this child, I fricking hate her. I never imagined I'd have hateful feelings for a 4-year-old, but I do. Unless some magical meteor falls out of the sky and strikes this beast on the head with some common fricking sense and manners, she's going nowhere in life. Every time I turn my back to even take a leak, she's fricking something up or causing turmoil in the house. Whether it's digging through the fridge and leaving perishables out on the floor, even though I just fed her 10 minutes before, or slamming cabinet doors because I don't fricking know why, or clipping leashes on my old rescue dog and playing Walk, which consists of her tugging and tugging on my poor dog's harness as it mutters and looks for me to help him. I've asked her what her favorite lunch was and she said grilled cheese. So I made grilled cheese and then walked to put laundry from the washer to the dryer, only to return 3 minutes later to find her digging through the fridge again and the sandwich in the trash can. I'm no stranger to kids either. I raised my first wife's 2 kids, I inherited my daughter after her father had an accident, I have 2 other sons of my own, and I adopted my wife's 3 children. I'm a mother-frickin' 8-star general when it comes to kids and their quirks, but my god, this child is a worthless frickin' butthole. I've bitten my tongue in silence to the point of exhaustion, and I haven't treated her indifferently or mentioned my true feelings about her with my wife, but I'm pretty sure she knows. I think she knows because she's been way too over-the-top nice to me for these past 2 days. Coffee overfloweth, kisses on the neck 10 times, chilled beers handed to me with a glowing smile. Yeah, she knows. I feel so much better being able to vent this crap anonymously online because I'm damn sure anyone would justifiably reel back in horror if they heard me say these things up front face to face. I would have been shocked as well before yesterday. My mother decided to have another kid when I was 13. We lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment. They put his crib in their room, thank goodness, but on the same wall where the top of my bed was. I couldn't sleep for about 9 months. I ended up having to restart my school grade, and I could never have friends over because it was too loud for the baby. So yeah, screw the little jerks. Not to get too dark, but I remember watching an interview of the mother of one of the victims of America's many high school weapon-related mass tragedies. She said she gave birth, looked at her son, and felt like a dark cloud went over, and how her first thought was, "This child will bring you sorrow." Just no. Very morbid, but that creeped me out. When all of my friends that had kids disappeared from my life as they have no time to themselves at all anymore. And they always look tired and they're getting fatter quickly. It's like they don't even have the time to plan their meals properly, so they just don't eat healthy. And when we do get together, it's not the same. It changes people. They can't just hang out anymore. It needs to be a planned event. I've got one life, guys. The world is already overpopulated. I'm going to do me. And separated couples with kids is hell on earth 99% of the time. Since we asked a specific question asking for people who are anti-kid to apply with their answers, it's fair enough that we've got answers that are very negative about the subject. But the narrator would like to state that he knows many parents who thrive and even seem happier after the fact. So if you want or have kids and are feeling challenged by this video, keep thinking over why, but know that these answers don't actually represent a universal experience of raising a family. Every time my friends can't do anything fun because they have to go to their kids' events. I'm all down for children, but be reasonable and don't have them if you aren't ready to give them your life. Every single time one of my coworkers has to stay out of work because their kids is sick. Every single time they zone out because they only got 2 hours of sleep. "Oh, it's worth it," they'll say. I call bullcrap on that. This Be the Verse by Philip Larkin. They frick you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fricked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can, and don't have any kids yourself. As soon as I started teaching the special need ones, there's a part of me that never wants to take that risk. I understand completely that there are plenty of people with special needs who live full, rich, independent lives, but there are also plenty that will have the mental capabilities of a 3-year-old no matter how much you try to teach them. There are plenty who'll need to use diapers for their whole lives. When they get finished with school, maybe they can get a very menial job somewhere, but more likely they never will. They'll live at home until their parents can't physically take care of them anymore, and then they'll go into a group home. When I was young, I recall my mum telling me kids were an 18-year commitment, and that's always been in my head anytime I think about having kids. I'm not ready for an 18-year commitment now, even at 31. Also, it's probably related that I'm the oldest daughter in a family of 6 kids. I did a lot of babysitting when I was younger. I enjoy my sleep, I enjoy my money, I enjoy a clean house. I babysat my niece for an afternoon last week, and I crap you not, I've never wanted to punt a kid like a goddamn football before. I get it, kids can be hyper, but my brother and sister let this little bag of crap get away with murder. They laugh when she says mean, spiteful things and talk back to me or her grandparents. Oh, and take pictures when she messes up the house, like Flour and OJ all over the kitchen. And then they get mad when we tell this kid no. Which, I don't want to take you to the zoo and watch you act like a damn fool. She pulls my dog's tail and ears, and luckily Jamie is a good sport about it. My sister-in-law had the gall to witch me out. If your dog snaps and bites her, I'm going to take a weapon and put that mutt in the ground. Sorry, it's been one hell of a weekend. What basic fact broke your brain? When I was a little kid, my mum would bet me that I couldn't eat my carrots without making them make a snap noise. I was determined to prove her wrong, carefully biting in until snap. Damn it. Let's try the next one. Careful, snap, damn it. I think I was about 16 before I realized she didn't care in the slightest about the bet, she just wanted me to eat my darn veggies. That's actually pretty clever. My mum is a sneaky one. She teaches elementary school and she's still using this bet on kids to this day. When I was 16, I worked weekends at a pharmacy. One morning, right after the store opened, some guy came in, shops around the store for a little while, and leaves without buying anything. Except when he gets to the door, he trips on our rug and falls flat on his face. I immediately stuck my head over the counter to make sure he was okay when he yelled, "Those aren't mine," and runs out. I look down on the ground and there's 2 badly dented 20-ounce beers on the ground. My initial thought was, oh my god, he tripped on those beers. Who put those on the ground by the exit? It took me about an hour to realize what he was actually up to. I grew up pretty sheltered and I never swore. In high school, I heard someone say mofo once, and I thought it sounded pretty cool. So I went around calling my friends and even a teacher mofo for a few days before someone finally told me it was short for mother fricker. I got an electric toothbrush for my birthday. I was also traveling with family at the time. I happened to lose my toothbrush and looked everywhere for it. I was about to search through my dad's bags when I hit a side pocket and something started buzzing. Immediately, I wanted to search it and my dad flatly denied it, even slapping my hand away. We had an awkward moment where we didn't make eye contact. I was so mad, but I let it drop. Later that day, I was cleaning out a box from the car when lo and behold, I found my toothbrush. Cold realization washed over me. If it was an electric shaver, Dad would have taken it out and shown me. In the top 3 most embarrassing is when someone casually mentioned that Diagon Alley in Harry Potter was just diagonally. I died a little that day. And then there's Nocturne Alley, nocturnally. As is often the case with these sorts of videos, the narrator just kind of hears about a whole bunch of dumb mistakes that he's also been making for way too long. In this case, I did actually know about diagonally, but nocturnally sailed right over my head. At a grade school field trip to a local nature trail, we were treated to a scavenger hunt. We divided into teams and drew our list from a hat. My team was to search for 10 objects that were evidence that people have been in the park. All of the lists were similar. We were picking up trash. Pimps. I thought they were just colorfully dressed black men, the African-American equivalent of the 90s swing dancing, zoot suit riot craze. Keep your pimp hand strong meant you literally needed a strong hand for slapping that upright bass. For way too long, I wondered why we never heard about all the other units' code names, like from A0 to Z9. Why is it only the K9 unit? Oh. Mine would have to be the Scarecrow. I realized at 18 years old that it's called that because it scares crows. I realized that pitch black meant something was as dark as pitch, and I've helped my neighbors shingle roofs several times before. One day, while driving my mother around town, it randomly dawned on me what my parents were really doing when they locked themselves in their bedroom and told me that they were going to talk about my birthday and Christmas presents. My parents would take naps in the afternoon, on weekends, and lock their bedroom door. They'd also get really mad if you bothered them during that time. It took me a long time to figure out what was really going on. Not me, but my husband. One evening we were out bowling with friends, and I took my purse to the bathroom with me. My husband was saying, "Why are you taking your purse to the bathroom? Don't you trust your friends?" While all of our female friends were giving him that look. After a while, it dawns on him why I might be taking the purse to the bathroom, and he says, "Oh, that's why Mom always got mad when I asked her that question when I was a kid. We were married, y'all. Definitely old enough to know better." Green herb. When I was a really little kid, I saw my dad and his friend, quote, rolling their own cigarettes. It wasn't until college that I smelled what was apparently really good green herb, and I said, "Hey, that smells like my dad's cigarette." Oh. I overheard a coworker talking about her pet duck, and I was fascinated. I asked her questions about her duck, like what it ate, and I expressed fascination that she took it on walks. She looked at me strangely when I asked more questions and expressed more enthusiasm for all the things her duck did. She had one amazing duck. It even did tricks. I always brought up her duck in conversations. One day, about 6 months later, she brought her dog into work. Well, I came to the wrong conclusion, but it was at the time I thought all of my friends' parents had acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. When I was 8 years old, I asked my mum how babies are made. She gave me a clear, honest answer. From doing the deed. A few months later, we began taking care of a family friend who was dying from a transmissible disease I mentioned at the start. I asked my mum how someone gets it, to which my mum responded, "From doing the deed." So I put 2 and 2 together and went to school the next day and burst into tears, telling all of my friends that our parents were going to die because we were all made from doing the deed, and that gives you acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. I thought my roommate in college had a live-in girlfriend that I never saw. There were always women's clothes strewn all around his room, pink flip-flops and high heels at the door, and lots of feminine hair and skincare products. One day we were sitting on the couch playing video games when I asked him, "Hey, why is it that I never see your girlfriend around?" He looked at me and said, "I don't have a girlfriend, I've been single since I got here." "Oh, whose high heels are those in the hallway?" He gave me one of those looks like he couldn't quite comprehend it, and then it suddenly dawned on him, "Dude, we've been living together for a year and a half and you haven't figured out I'm trans?" In hindsight, it was rather obvious. Eminem. M and M. Marshall Mathers. I realized this last year and I'm 21. I realized on a road trip that hazmat means hazardous materials. I was 23 when I made that realization. Well, once again, the narrator is in their mid-30s and didn't realize this right up until they wrote the script for this video, so consider me dunked on. Embarrassingly enough, it took me a long time to get the K Jeweler's "every kiss begins with K" pun. I legit remember saying out loud, "Oh my god, the letter K. Duh." The "Christmas only comes once a year" joke from the end of The World Is Not Enough. I only got it about a month ago. I'm 23 and I've watched that movie dozens of times. It was like a pin dropping. I suddenly went, "Oh, I get it. Oh dear." English is not my mother tongue, but I've been speaking it fluently for about 15 years now. Some weeks ago, out of the blue, I had the sudden realization that the word movie is just a short form for moving pictures. Mind blown. I was about 23 or 24, I'd been smoking out with friends the previous evening and wanted to clean out my pipe. There were cruddy bits of resin and gunk, if only I had something good to clean this with. Some kind of long, stiff yet flexible wire with a cleaning surface. Wouldn't it be great to have a pipe cleaning tool? A pipe cleaner? I'd never put it together that pipe cleaners were meant to clean pipes. I'd only ever used them to make crafts at school and summer camp. A fortnight is 14 nights. Seemed such a weird word before I found that out. In my drama class, we listened to a few songs from a musical at a time and then analyzed them. The first one we listened to was Hair. My teacher would bleep out the swear words by making this loud screaming or whooping sound, and I never understood why. One day we were discussing and I ended up saying, "Oh, do you make up that noise to cover up the swear words?" And my teacher looked at me and asked what I thought he was doing. I thought you were really excited about musicals. The entire class started slow clapping for my stupidity. A couple of years ago, I realized the Target logo is a target. My father didn't understand that Cruella de Vil was a play on Cruel Devil until he saw it on a license plate one day while driving me to school. Everything I'm trying to debug. I've delayed myself an entire hour because of one semicolon? Again? Excellent. I worked in a lighting warehouse over the last few summers. We refer to 12,000 watt lights as 12Ks. I'm like, okay, K equals 1,000. It took me until my second summer working there, at 18 years old, to realize that K wasn't just shorthand for 100, it's short for kilo, as in 12 kilowatts. God bless America. When I attended the West End show The Lion King, I genuinely expected there to be giraffes, lions, hyenas, and other such animals on stage. My crestfallen disappointment swiftly turned to embarrassment as I had already loudly raised certain logistical queries around this with other members of our party and people sat there in the theatre. What happens if the hyenas get overexcited and just attack Timon and Pumbaa? When I realized, I sat very quietly for the duration of the show. I was 27. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I only recently realized that Iceland, the supermarket we have here in England, was called that because they mostly sold frozen food. One day when I was a kid, I realized that the word vitamins was a portmanteau for vital minerals. It was embarrassing because it totally isn't that. You're close though. Vitamins come from vital amines, and although not all vitamins are amines, they are all vital. My mum used to say things like, "We have to rush because your dad is an old fuddy-duddy and likes getting to places half an hour early." About 2 weeks ago, I booked a table for 7:30 and told the missus it was 7 so that we were only 5 minutes late. The penny dropped for me. My mum's friends would invite her to dinner and would always tell her to show up an hour to 90 minutes before so she'd actually be on time. "Oh yeah, come for dinner. We are eating at 5:30. Come at 5:30. The narrator has had partners where he's been tempted to pull this tactic before, but then he realized that if he ever got caught in the act, he could potentially be revealed as having lied to his partner for multiple years. Whether or not it was for a valid reason probably wouldn't factor into things. Breakfast is called breakfast because it's when you break your fast. I was 28 and like many people, I realized it from Game of Thrones. Patrick Star is so stupid because he literally lives under a rock. It took me a while to realize it was called afternoon because it took place after noon. Wait till you figure out the meaning of weekend. April of 2015, I called my parents. "Happy anniversary, Mum and Dad. How many years is it?" My mum says, 22. Wait, so you got married in April of 1993? Yes. I was born in August of 1993. Yes. So technically, I was in there? Yes. Anything else you want to share? Oh, I was married once before your father for 4 months. What? The first symbol in the Disney logo is just a fancy D. When I was a kid, I thought it was some crazy design, never challenged the idea until much later. When I was growing up, we did a lot of chores around the house, including gathering up everyone's laundry. My dad always used a cloth hanky and has his entire adult life. Gross, I know, and he always keeps one in his back pocket. Every so often, Mum would pull out their bed and have us collect all the hankies my dad had stuffed behind the headboard. Literally 20 or 30 of them all gunked up. My child brain thought Dad had night allergies and was hocking weird loogies into them. My adult brain realized they were his splooge rags because they used the pull-out method. It was the 70s and 80s and birth control wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. I just realized the band The Beatles is a play on words with the word beat, like a music beat. When my mum told me 2 days ago that women do not in fact pee out of their hoo-has, I'm an 18-year-old male. Washington, D.C. was not in the state of Washington. Only recently found out that pickles were cucumbers originally. I just thought they were another kind of vegetable and that when you pickled something, you were putting it in pickle juice. Back in high school, I knew these 2 identical twins. I was sitting with them at lunch, either first or second day of grade 9, and at one point I noticed they looked alike. I said something along the lines of, "You guys look alike," and one of them was like, "Yeah, we're twins." I even remember during the assembly earlier that day, I sat beside one of them and I saw her sister sitting somewhere further down, and I was confused. I was on a travel assignment years ago where another coworker and I sometimes flew to a regional airport together. One flight, the flight attendant made some incomprehensible announcement on the PA just before people started deplaning. My ears were a wreck from the flight, so I had no idea what she had said. As I got off, she glared at me and said sarcastically, "Nice." A few months later, my coworker and I were talking about something or other, and he mentions the time some kid barfed all over the airplane aisle, and I guess I stepped in it that time. Florida. I realized at the age of 23 that the Count from Sesame Street is a multi-level pun. It blew my gosh darn mind. In ancient folklore, vampires were actually obsessed with counting. One of the ways to outrun them was to spill a bag of rice. They'd get caught up obsessively counting the rice grains, so it's like a triple-level pun. I mean, that second comment is just a very cool piece of trivia. See? We're not just here to make you feel dumb, folks. You can see the moon because the sun is shining light on its surface. Just hit me like a ton of bricks when I was about 20 or so. Don't know what I thought before that. Some teacher failed at their job. Bill Nye was booed by a bunch of Christians for telling them that a year or so ago, so don't feel bad. Last year at age 42, I realized that Staples sold all the staples you need for your business, and that they didn't just pick a random office supply for the name. I figured it might as well have been staplers or paper clips. that someone I knew in my family was a closet green herb smoker. Literally, the person I knew for years had smoked green herb in their closet and always covered it up. I put two and two together when I started to smoke. That donut holes are from the center part of the round donut. I always assumed it was a donut hole, like WHOLE, and it didn't occur to me until last year. Growing up, my cousin's grandmother had a female friend she lived with. It was kind of an open secret that she was her lesbian girlfriend and nobody cared. I'm now 29 and was recently talking to my cousin about it. My mother, who spent a lot of time with these two women, said, "Wait, they were lesbians?" Still not clear how this is something a bunch of 12-year-olds figured out, but my mum couldn't. I grew up very poor and way out in the country. One night while visiting some friends for dinner, we got lost and ended up being late. My friend's wife goes to fix me a plate for dinner and she put it in the microwave. It was at this point I realized that she put some corn on my plate. I ran as fast as I could across the dining area and told her to make it stop. She did and asked what was the matter. I then let her know that I didn't want the thing turning my corn into popcorn. Sophomore year of college, it finally dawned on me that one of 3 off-campus apartment mates was gay when I came back earlier than he had expected one night and saw him on the sofa with another guy. He never gave any hints about his sexuality before then, but I put 2 and 2 together when it occurred to me that the only people he ever hung out with were males and that he had no typical straight interests. Late to the thread, but I didn't realize the symbol on Superman's chest was an S. I saw the negative space around the S and thought it was some crazy Kryptonian language. We did an art project in grade school, I think it was probably 3rd or 4th grade, where you'd draw a word you thought described you and add other elements to it. You could use the dictionary or thesaurus to pick a word. I wanted to do something about being smart or sensible, but I didn't think either of those were pretty enough words, so I picked the word sensual. My teacher even tried to dissuade me, but I refused to listen. The worst part is I picked it from the dictionary but didn't look at the definition. I didn't think about it again until I saw all the words displayed a few years later when I was in the 6th grade. At that point, I wanted to die inside. Not me, but my husband didn't learn that "meet you there at quarter after" means 15 minutes after, not 25 minutes after the hour. A quarter, like 25 cents, not 1/4. We're in our mid-20s. I saw a brick on the outside of my school that said Anno Domini and a year. Saw another Anno Domini brick on a friend's church. I loudly proclaimed that the architects for both were the same person. Weeks later, it occurred to me that they were the dates over 100 years apart. I wish I hadn't been telling people all about that guy Anno Domini for the weeks until I figured it out. Anno Domini means Year of Our Lord, so the date built. Noodles and Company is called that because you eat noodles with company. There isn't some other noodle company that the restaurant owns. While some of these have made the narrator feel very, very dumb, there have been a few like this last one that soften the blow and inform us that at least there's someone below us in the ranking of human intelligence, so thank you, commenter. The 6th grade science teacher, Mrs. Parks, asked her class, "Which human body part increases to 10 times its size when stimulated?" No one answered until little Mary stood up and said, "You should not be asking 6th graders a question like that. I'm going to tell my parents, and they'll go and tell the principal who'll fire you." Miss Parks ignored her and asked the question again. "Which body part increases to 10 times its size when stimulated?" Little Mary's mouth fell open. Then she said to those around her, "Boy, is she gonna get in big trouble." The teacher continued to ignore her and said to the class, "Anybody?" Finally, Bill stood up, looked around nervously and said, "The body part that increases to 10 times its size when stimulated is the pupil of the eye." Mrs. Parks said, "Very good, Billy." Then turned to Mary and continued, "As for you, young lady, I have 3 things to say. 1, you have a very dirty mind. 2, you didn't read your homework, and 3, one day you're going to be very, very disappointed." I just figured out a few days why Mary was going to be disappointed when she got older. When I realized that a pancake is literally a cake you make in a pan. Last year I came to the conclusion that Antarctica is named that because it's opposite of the Arctic. My ex cheating on me. What? No, she'd never do that to me, just because she hasn't been talking to me a lot in the past few weeks. and been hanging out with that mutual friend of ours after school a couple of days in the past week and not telling me about it, and been getting really odd when I bring that friend up in conversation, and getting super paranoid about me hanging out with other girls outside of school. Oh, okay. Guess this is somehow my fault. Huh. When people said they lived out in the sticks, I thought the sticks was a real place, like the Cotswolds or the Midlands. 28 before that particular penny dropped during a conversation with a client. What's the weirdest thing someone wanted to put in their will? I'm a qualified solicitor. My two favourites are a lady who wanted to create a trust fund of £100,000 for her pet fish. When I asked if it was a special kind of fish, she confirmed it was just a normal goldfish, but she wanted it to be fed fresh avocado every day and be looked after by a local dog walker after she died. She was absolutely serious. There was also another lady who confessed that she had a secret daughter and she wanted to leave said daughter some money and photographs without the rest of her family finding out. Even her husband doesn't know. That'll be a fun conversation when she passes away. My great-granddad has a clause in his will that stated something along the lines of, if any of the beneficiaries decide to dispute the contents of the descendant's estate, their share becomes $1 and not a cent more. Seems like a pretty good way to maintain harmony among his survivors. I have this in my will. If someone isn't happy with my dying wish, they can politely say no and pass on it. If someone wants to be greedy, they get nothing but $1 minus postage and handling. My grandfather saved his kidney stone so that he could leave it to my cousin. They never really got along. When my grandfather passed, his will asked that I clean out his shed and I alone do it. I found green herb seeds, old-timey film reel-style adult films of undressed women, which was hilarious, and a bunch of other unsavory paraphernalia. 50s flick knives as well. So it's a bit like clearing his browser history for him, but cooler. A relative worked for a firm preparing wills and was confronted by an executor who had an edict to scatter the deceased's ashes from a microlight aircraft. He couldn't fly one. She kindly pointed out to him that the drafting said nothing about whether said microlight was in flight at the time of scattering. Okay, on the one hand, I despise honouring the letter but not the spirit of the law like this, and it's a little disrespectful. But then, whatever that relative was thinking, it's very, very inconvenient to go up and learn to fly a plane for this one single purpose, and I don't know how well they knew the deceased. Also, I don't love the idea of burning all that fuel for this one flying license that you'll never use again, and the deceased wasn't really in a position to complain. I had a Russian client, son of an oligarch. His father created a trust which provided dispositive provisions for if he was kidnapped and not found within a certain number of months. It freaked me out. I believe the will had similar language too, but I can't remember now. Now that I think about it, I believe there was a separate document, in addition to the trust, that provided that his will should be effective to the extent he was kidnapped and not recovered within a certain period of time. My friend's mother had in her will that the cat gets to live in my house alone until it expires. That cat lived there for a few years alone with a caregiver checking in on it. Yes, she was rich. I worked with plenty of estates and trust accounts over the years. This particular scenario isn't so much about the will itself being strange, but the circumstances that led up to the trust account being opened. I worked at a bank in the estates department. I was an administrator who managed the files, including encroachments upon the capital. Like, I want to take out some money now, please. I had this one account, multi-million-dollar trust for one single beneficiary, the son of the deceased. What's interesting is that the son killed the parents with a hammer in a grotesque and brutal fashion. He pled insanity. He'd call once a year from the penitentiary or mental hospital requesting $50 for commissary, like, to buy chips and gum. The call was always very strange. He was very polite and sounded very medicated. The quality of the call was always very tinny, like he was far away from the phone. While the will might have been voided by their murder, my understanding is that in this case, since it was determined that the beneficiary was not of sound mind and was placed in an institution as a result of his actions, he was not in fact convicted. Thus, the terms of the trust would hold true. Had he been deemed guilty and of sound mind, the trust definitely would have been voided. Just last week, I handled a matter where the parents left millions in artwork to various people, wads of cash to various charities, and only left their kids, the family cats. Turns out they did it because the kids got them the cats to comfort the parents in their old age, and the parents fricking hated cats, but the kids wouldn't let them get rid of the animals. My mum put in her will that if she dies under any suspicious circumstances, that my sister and I won't be left anything. She watches a lot of true crime. She's an upper-middle-class realtor. She makes money, but not enough money to be murdered over. Also, neither of us are murderers. Does it need to be said? This one isn't necessarily crazy, just an interesting glimpse into the mind of a kind old woman in her 90s. My aunt and uncle, both were more like parents and incredibly beautiful people, passed away within a few weeks of one another. When my uncle became ill, the aunt tried to work on a will with her long-term lawyer, but she was just kind of old and out of it. Her main concern the entire time was small knickknacks like a jar of pennies she wanted a distant cousin to have, or a used jacket from the 70s she bequeathed to a sister-in-law. It was quite touching how much time she actually spent considering each item and who would get it. Most of the items were used and didn't really hold any sentimental value. She just wanted them to go to good homes. When she passed away, everyone knew exactly who was getting each odd item. The real kicker is when the lawyer told the primary beneficiaries that she never actually got around to the bigger assets and all that jazz. She basically told the lawyer, "Pay for our funeral and anything we owe, and then family members X, Y, and Z can figure out the rest." It ended up being millions in homes, a lakefront property, jewelry, antique firearms, vehicles, life insurance policies, stocks, bonds, gold coins. Luckily, the family was very close and everything went off without a hitch. They were amazing people who wanted to keep family items in the family. They just didn't put that much weight on their incredible wealth. They also hid their wealth amazingly. We all knew that they were very comfortable, but no one had any idea that they were deep into 8-figure assets. It's just funny to see a random niece get a set of plastic cups, worn dance shoes, and a check for $125 grand. Whenever I visited my old grandma in Nicaragua, I'd always see my aunts and uncles being weirdly nice to her, almost as if she was a famous person. People would be visiting her house to greet her and striking a conversation. One day, my mother walked into my grandma's room to have a conversation with her, and I remember the flight back, 3 or 4 hours after the conversation. I asked what it was about. She told me that grandma used to have children that almost never talked to her, and now that she's sickly, they're trying to act nice to get stuff out of her will. My grandma wanted to talk to my mum to ask what she wanted from the house. My mum was always the favorite growing up since she cherished grandma, and grandma wanted to pay her back for being a good daughter. My mum replied, "I don't want anything from you, I just want your love." And they both smiled at each other. Also, she wanted us to take a washing machine back home to sell it for cash, but we declined. And by the way, my grandma's still alive, she's not given up yet. Good on her for knowing that and giving credit where it's due. Now you just have to stop those other relatives from moving in there and getting real manipulative, if it ever looks like the end is nigh. Sounds like it might eventually be the sort of thing that tears the family apart, but if the others are a bunch of vipers, good riddance. I read a lot of estate documents as part of my job. There is so much subtle shade in them occasionally, it can be pretty entertaining. One super wealthy lady had a huge section for the care and well-being of her pets, with primary and successor caretakers, a certain amount of money from the trust for care and feeding of each pet. One pet owner might receive $3,000 a month to take care of one of her pets after she passed, and certain stipulations on how they were to be cared for. While some might see it as excessive, the language and stipulations she had and how they were referred to showed that she really, really loved her pets. In that same will and trust, she also left a slew of people only $1 so that there would be no chance they could take the trust to probate court on the basis that they were merely forgotten. That part had so much subtle shade. A lot of, "They know what they did," and "They are well aware of their guilt in the matter." She split up about $2 million amongst 5 or 6 different animal rescues and animal welfare charities. It was about 200 pages long, and I swear I read the entire thing just for the sheer entertainment value. An aging woman my family knew left her house, which was very large and in a very affluent neighborhood, and estate to family friends for so long as her cats were alive and taken care of in said house. After the pets died, the house was to be sold and the remaining estate donated. The weird thing is, it's been like 20 years and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. My great-uncle's official will gave the contents of his outhouse to the city council of a nearby town after they'd tried to take his land twice to build a new water treatment plant. He spent quite a few years fighting eminent domain claims and just wanted to give them something in return. As a joke, his kids boxed up all the books and magazines in the outhouse and dropped them off at City Hall. Not a will, but a deed. The city I work for was renovating a small park that was donated to the city in the 1910s. We went looking through the handwritten deed for easements or other restrictions and found that the family could claw the property back if the park were not perpetually provided with a fountain of pleasant running water fit for consumption by man and beast alike. The family still has descendants in town, so we installed a new water fountain with a dog bowl filler just to be safe. Here's one from one of my dad's law partners. He had a lady come in with an itemized list of books and wanted her will to contain all of the books and who'll get what based on her choosing. So basically, she decides who gets what specific books instead of letting her beneficiaries decide. The truly astonishing thing is how many books and how specific they get. According to Dad's law partner, her list is about 2,000 books to be divided amongst 30 people. She's apparently very specific and comes back at least once a year to add all the new books she's gotten. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My sister's mother-in-law is leaving her house to her 3 sons. If one wants to sell out his third of the house, he has to sell it to the other 2 brothers for $1. They can sell it if all 3 agree. I think she wants her sons to use it like a cottage, a place where they all visit and stay for a while. 2 of the sons live on lakes nearby, so they would never use it as such, and the 3rd son lives with his mum in the house. He does take on a lot of the care responsibilities of his mum. She's 93, so that's nice. The other 2 brothers have done most of the home maintenance for decades, including weekly mowing and cleaning, and they still help in the care. When she dies, which unfortunately could be very soon, the 3rd son might not move out. He could freeload in that house forever, and his brothers would have to share in the tax payments and upkeep if they want to maintain their inheritance. A Furby collection from models collected in the late 90s. They were convinced they'd retain future value. This was in 2011. I'm the executor of my grandmother's will. I'll get the house and everything in it and a share of life insurance that's split 3 ways between myself, my sister, and my mum. My mum has always said that all that my dad, my grandmother's son-in-law, would like to have is some table. Well, in the will, there's like a whole paragraph that states how my dad gets nothing. He doesn't lay a finger on anything in the house or any money. How my dad is basically worthless and deserves nothing, and how he was a crap dad, and she begrudgingly has my mum in the will. Thanks, Grandma. I'll appreciate the awkwardness. Good God. And to my favorite grandchild, not the other one, I leave the majority of my possessions as long as he keeps the worthless sack of crap who spawned him away from all my stuff. My daughter can have 1 or 2 things, I guess. Same energy, to be honest. My grandpa gave me all of his tools, which sounds dumb, but we're in the same trade, and it was a real life changer. It included a lift and his old shop truck, so I pretty much got everything to start my own shop, apart from the building. Also, a pretty good chunk of change and his dog Tanner, as long as I made sure his live-in girlfriend at the time got nothing at all, and I told my uncle he was fat and his wife was going to leave him if she couldn't find his pecker. There was literally a script inside the will. It all went smoothly, and my uncle lost weight, and Janice is a jerk, and it turned out Tanner is kind of a jerk too, but it's okay, because my grandpa was kind of a jerk. A good one, but still sort of a jerk. They have the same mustache and eyebrows now, so I come home from work every now and again and get stared down by my grandpa while I go number 2. I work for a will writer and trust specialist in the UK, currently studying towards my TEP. One of our earlier clients passed recently. Turns out the man she left almost everything to, including the residue of her estate, which was considerable, was her regular taxi driver. She also named him as her executor. He had no clue. The woman named as her executor and main beneficiary of her previous 2 wills, a close friend of many years, was understandably flabbergasted and contested the will. We responded to her solicitor's Lark vs. Nergus request and informed the taxi driver, who didn't even know our client had passed away. And the will was upheld. The aforementioned friend was left a legacy of £5,000 if I remember correctly, but her nose was clearly out of joint. Bonus observation, it takes a lot less than £5,000 being up for grabs to make families turn against each other. It can get really nasty. One of the most startling things I've learned in my short time in this business. I had the first son, so my dad decided to leave me more. Except he did the math wrong and it came out to 105%. He had dementia. Kind of related. I worked on a divorce between a couple who fought over every single thing in the house, separating pillows and such. They were left 52 gallons of vanilla extract by their grandmother. In a secondary proceeding, he was awarded all but 5 gallons. 2 weeks later, he sent a case of samples in Ziploc baggies to our office, along with a request to subpoena a urine test from his ex-wife to prove she whittled in the jugs before he picked them up. We never needed to, as she screamed in court that she did that in full just like he weed all over her during their marriage. They were nice. This same couple went to court for nearly 2 years over a Beanie Baby collection. They had 3 kids. My vindictive grandmother left my aunt $20 as a reminder of the $20 my aunt stole from her once. One client left $100,000 to his 2 cats so they could maintain their current lifestyle. My grandpa put in his will a chocolate bar for every one of his grandkids. Well, I have like 12 cousins and they're very difficult to track down. All of his estates and money he had in his will was at a standstill for months because they couldn't find my couple of cousins. I had to show the court that we put in effort to hire someone to track them down. The lawyer that was helping execute the will was blown away that someone had allowed this to be written, and was very vocal about why he'd highly suggest not to track them down. But I'm not complaining because I got a Toblerone out of the deal. I was forced to write a will in my early 20s due to the health insurance I get at work, and amongst my sensible stuff, the in-house lawyer said it was totally okay for this clause to be added. My funeral wishes are that I be buried in a coffin which has been spring-loaded, such that opening the coffin would cause alarm to future archaeologists. Then a bunch of addendums about how if I didn't have the money for this, I'd be cremated and have my ashes scattered in a specific place. I was always curious if I could request that my head be removed from my body before burial in the case of a zombie outbreak so I'd do minimal damage to future generations. My old landlord took 2 years to boot me out because her mother who owned the place died and she just wanted to sell the place. But her mother's carer said the mother verbally promised the house to her. Even though it was not written in the will, it still took 2 years of fighting in court to clear things up. No, the carer didn't get it in the end, even after all the appeals. In my mum's will, which I've seen, she's left me the kitchen table and chairs. She lives on a South Manchester council estate. My brother gets the sideboard. Wow, lucky! Imagine owning a table. Maybe if my parents pass away prematurely I could own mine someday. Living that high life, in an apartment, with furniture, and something other than garbage bags for curtains. My great-grandmother left most of her money to a local donkey sanctuary? No ma'am, in order to bequeath something you actually have to own it. My client wanted her ashes spread at the restaurant on the beach where she met her husband. That's really sweet. Not for everyone else getting Linda in their butthole, it isn't. I work in probate. The oddest thing I've seen in a will is to euthanize their beloved horse, have it cremated, and its ashes scattered with the deceased. Luckily for her horse, she named a horse that was already dead, so the one she got afterwards lived to see another farm. Me and a friend from middle school have an agreement that he gets $10 out of my estate. I also want all beneficiaries notified by a mysterious man in a dark suit, preferably on a dark rainy day. Lawyer here, probably the woman who wanted to gift the frozen splooge of her dead dog. Lots of people sending their friends and family on weird errands to spread their ashes, leaving money for people to take trips and spread them around the world with. Pet trusts are another fun one, leaving a whole whack of money in a trust to be used for the care of the pet during their life. However, my favorite ever, that I obviously didn't draft, was a lawyer who left the bulk of his estate, millions in today's dollars, to whatever Toronto area woman had the most children at a specific date some year in the future. I recall the winner had 10 kids. When a dad died, he set up financial installments, so as long as his daughter remains under a certain weight, dude was controlling her diet from beyond the grave. A famous case most law students read is of a mother who left a ton to her son, provided he married a Jewish woman. Well, he was already married to a non-Jewish woman. Big mess. My grandfather left me a buck. He had dementia and confused my dad ripping him off with me. He left the rest of the family between $100,000 and a few million each. They all said they felt horrible because they knew the details, but not horrible enough to give up any of their share. The way I see it is that it was never my money to begin with, so it's not a loss. I'm just glad my sister got $100,000. She needed it more than any of those others. A good clause is always, for reasons known to them, which is will speak for, you've gone and messed up, jerk, I don't forgive you. In my own will, I've left my father the contents of my kitchen trash can at the time of my passing, for reasons known to him. He could very well outlive me. His side of the family lives forever, like reaching 100 or more isn't unheard of for them. I take after my mother's side, which has significant heart disease. I understand I could follow either, both, or neither, but I could also just get hit by a bus tomorrow and die unexpectedly. I figured it was the safest to actively disinherit him rather than stay silent and assume I'll outlive him. Worked with a client who wanted language that her cats would be euthanized and buried with her. The moral part just went over her head, so he had to explain why legally we couldn't do that. One of the few clients who ever got under my skin. What's it like dating a sociopath? I had a friend who married one. There were no warning signs. From my perspective, he was genuinely a decent guy. Had a sales job, and I do sales, so we got along. Then it was seriously the night of the wedding he got really controlling. It was like a light switch flipped. They went on their honeymoon the next week, and she called me halfway through thinking she had made a mistake. She said he just picked at her for saying the wrong thing, and his idea of the future made her sound like a slave. I didn't think too much about it. A lot of people have fights on their honeymoon. She got pregnant like a month into it. Then he moved her back east so they could live with his mum, even though he was supposed to be making a lot of money. She quit calling me much after the wedding. I assumed it was a newlywed plus baby planning thing, so I didn't think too much about it. Then we noticeably drifted, and I didn't know until years later that it was because he got mad whenever she talked to other people. So yeah. He moved her out of state, got her pregnant, and had 2 other families on the side. She finally got out of it, messed her up for a long time. A friend of mine dated a diagnosed sociopath and said it was frustrating because there wasn't any logic behind her attraction to him. She realized he wasn't good to her, but she couldn't stop going back to him. She described him as both the best thing and worst thing in her life when she was with him. Oh, he was a classic, into animal torture and stuff like that. The way he got to talking endlessly about animal torture was by pretending he felt bad for it and looking for sympathy. Like, I can't believe I did that. I feel so bad. He kept mentioning it so much. He thought it was funny when me or the baby had pain. At one point, he told me that it was so long ago that by now, I should also think it was funny that he had gotten my blood and my pieces of flesh on him. He said that me having empathy was proof that I was mentally ill because empathy doesn't exist. You just learn in your teens that there's consequences for being bad to other people. He also said that nobody cares about women, they're like steak in the supermarket, and that when he saw a woman in the streets, he thought about committing the unspeakable act. He is incredibly charismatic, and the police said that I made a false report. He's still getting back at me for leaving through the legal system. My lord. If any of our viewers have ever dated someone like this, you have my deepest sympathy because it sounds truly horrific. And those of us who have yet to hit the sociopath in our dating lives can thank our lucky stars. Disclaimer, I am not nor have I ever been in a romantic relationship with my brother. I misread the post. However, I have lived with my sociopath brother and can relay why it would probably be a nightmare to date someone like him. He's my twin. Things happened when we were little, I couldn't have linked up then, but I most certainly do now. As twins, we obviously got 2 of everything. He'd destroy his, take mine and then say I destroyed mine to get his thing because it was better somehow. He hugged the family cat so hard it panted when he let it go. Every time. Once, he mysteriously found the cat with a broken leg and decided not to tell Mum. He was just constantly trying to cause chaos, pinning everyone in the house against each other. He'd start arguments, seemingly for the fun of it, and he'd always find a way to slip into the background while we screamed at each other. His worst offense was when he cut himself on the leg with a razor and told Mum and Dad I'd made him do it. My parents nearly got divorced because of him. Then they later got divorced for other reasons. He told me a while later that he lied about everything. He liked doing that, messing things up and only telling me. I was branded as a liar for most of my childhood, and no one really trusted anything I said because of him, so he took all the more delight in confiding in me because he knew what it would do. He lives with my dad now, and I haven't spoken to him in 4 years. But I do have a fun story if people ask who the evil twin is, I guess. I dated one, and it was traumatizing. I felt like I was losing my mind from the casual cruelty and gaslighting. Took forever for me to trust obvious truths again, since he was so skilled at maliciously twisting them. 0.03 out of 10 I would not recommend. Yes, he admitted his diagnosis proudly, at least to me. He was very troubled. I was only with him 8 months, but those 8 months were the worst of my life. He seemed happy to discover I didn't have stable housing. He asked if I'd like to move in. I said no, so he started causing problems with the people I was crashing with. I didn't realize this until later that he was the one who got me kicked out. Once I had no choice but to stay with him, the hotels, or the streets, he laughed and said he's breaking his lease. Maybe if I'd done what he said faster, I'd be able to stay. But that I could sleep in his basement if I liked? He'd do weird crap like that. Make me wait outside of bars, his jobs, his friends' houses. It was this whole thing he'd make me do, especially if the weather was poor. When he drank, it was worse. I'd sleep in the bathroom if he was on the sauce to get away from him. If I didn't, he'd attack me when he blacked out. He's wanted for murder in another country now. No clue where he is, but I'll randomly get contacted by him. It's been years, but he still does it. All he says is, "I love you." Once he got into my email and changed my name to I love you. I know 100% that it's him. I've seen and been through a lot of messed up stuff in my life. It is what it is. But that man takes the frickin' cake for the most awful experiences in my entire life. There are people I meet or see on TV that have the exact look in their eyes or voice pattern as him, despite looking nothing like him. I avoid those people like the plague or sprint to turn the TV off when they appear. It's like they over-enunciate certain points of words yet have a monotone voice. The latter especially. It's like they're parroting a human and they're not actually one. One thing he always did was watch YouTube videos and practice in the mirror on how to look happy, sad, or concerned. It was insane. Everyone thought he was the greatest guy on earth. His mother tried to warn me that he'd kill me. It was messed up. Yes, I dated a narcissistic sociopath. It was terrible. It left permanent scars. It took time, but I now realize that everything was a lie. Well, his name was correct, but what he thought, felt, did, his plans and his history, I knew none of those things. He's a complete stranger and I never knew him at all. I'm doing fine now, although once in a while I'll stop and shake my head because I feel so goddamn dumb. I don't imagine that it's common for sociopaths to get diagnosed as such. They tend to live in denial. They don't think they have issues worth exploring. Yes, I dated one and it was the worst experience of my life. By the time it was over, multiple years, I had no idea who he was. That's what it was like. This is very true. Why would someone who has as little regard as we've seen in some of these stories ever care enough about how much damage they do to take the first steps to treatment? Do any of our commenters know of stories of people like this bettering themselves? Sound off. There wasn't any diagnosis, but I was casually with a guy who was sending up some pretty serious red flags, and it suddenly clicked that he was a sociopath. No empathy, would absolutely lie to people's faces, huge plans that went nowhere, nothing was ever his fault, rules were for other people. When I drifted away from him or hung out with someone else, he'd start putting lots of effort in again. And of course, there was cheating, lying, among other things. Luckily for me, I'd recognized it early, and I realized I needed to be careful about how I went about detaching myself from him. So here's what I did, and hopefully it can help someone. I never actually broke things off with him or told him we were done. Obviously, this only works if you're casual, but maybe some variation of it could work. So an example would be that when he asked me for something, I knew he wanted it right then and there. So whenever he contacted me to ask for it, I'd say, "Sure, that sounds great. I get off work in 3 hours and I'll come over with it right after that." He'd say, "No, never mind." I'd act like I was disappointed about it, so he thought he had successfully punished me. He thought that I was still on the hook. I'd do this over and over until he stopped thinking of me as someone he could get things from. It took a while and a lot of acting upset when he'd berate me or snap at me. I specifically remember sitting in his room while he yelled at me about where I put my purse down, thinking, okay, remember Vi, this is very upsetting, looks sad, but it did work without him going to any extremes, and we lived in the same building, so it was hard to just avoid him altogether. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Yep, by far the hardest experience of my life. I was with him for nearly a year, 6 years ago, still working on recovery today. Tried to separate me from my friends and family, made me feel responsible for him emotionally and financially. One of the first things he did after about a week of dating was convince me to pay for his $400 phone bill so he could have his phone switched back on and stay in contact with me. That was only the beginning. I lost all of my self-worth. By the end, I felt completely crazy. It's insane what prolonged exposure to gaslighting will do to a person. I ended up dropping out of uni because he would sabotage me at every turn. I'll never forget when I was working on a major project and he'd keep walking past me calling me a fricking B-word and spitting on my piece. I was the only one working, and supporting 2 people on a crap hospitality wage is hard enough, and then adding in about $300 a week of a green herb addiction. If he didn't have that stuff, he'd lose his crap. He'd throw things, smash things. It was safer for me to keep him dosed up, and in turn, I smoked a crapload to escape the reality of the situation. I finally got out when I found out that he had working girls in the house and in my bed. I finally opened up to my friends what had been happening, and they got me out of there. It was messed up, but I tried to see it in a positive light. I've learned and gained massive self-esteem since this happened, and I find I can easily detect sociopathic and narcissistic personalities, not people now. I still get super triggered by things, especially guys yelling or showing aggression. I still get annoyed at myself for breaking down in these situations, but each time it happens, I feel myself heal just a little bit. I see it as a wound reopening, but then the scar tissue builds up, making me stronger each time. Sorry for such a long rant. Seeing this question hit me, and it feels good to get a bit of stuff off my chest. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was married to one. It was awful. We had a child and he cheated while I was pregnant with a woman I specifically said, "I don't trust her, please avoid being alone with her too," when she joined my group. Other friends basically invited her in. He was verbally and mentally awful. He told me no one would want me because I was a young single mum, so I may as well come home and just let him cheat with whoever he felt like cheating with. I moved across the country to escape his insanity. The best way I learned to deal with him is to ignore him and not give a crap. It messed with his ego big time. He really doesn't know how to deal with someone who actually gives 0 shots about him. He'd try to tell me about whatever was going on in his life and I'd say, "Why are you telling me this? I don't care. Don't speak to me unless it's about your son." He kidnapped my child during one of the visits. Because our divorce was final in our home state, nothing could be done. It took me 2 years of fighting to win full sole custody of my son, who's now grown and doesn't have much to do with his dad. There's of course a lot more to the story. Psychological warfare and such. He tried to make me think I was going crazy when I started to become suspicious. He tried to torture me for 18 years. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years and I feel free. He's been told that if he so much as tries to speak to me at events for my son, like graduation, college graduation, military basic training graduation, that I'll walk away. I have nothing to say to the man and he has nothing of worth to say to me. My son learned on his own what kind of person his dad is and is remarkably well-adjusted and full of empathy. Traumatic. I'm in therapy, but I'm scared of people now. I don't know if I want to get married or have kids. I beat myself up for it because there were so many signs that he was that way. But I still wanted him. Even a few years after we first broke up, I ended up catching herpes. He never cared about me and only cared about himself. He used me. I got really mad at myself when I think about it. Even typing this out, my anxiety is slightly hitting me. I learned that I was in love with the idea of being in love and that my self-esteem was low. It's probably going to be a long time before I trust people again. One of my biggest fears is falling into it again. And even worse, not leaving. I'm thankful that I have friends and family that help me. I don't feel alone. I feel love all the time. One thing that's been very telling in these stories has not just been of the hard, scary times these people go through during dating these people, but the seemingly long-lasting damage to their victims' self-esteem and future relationships. I really have no words. My first boyfriend told me on our first date that he was a sociopath and, "I don't feel anything, but I sure know I like you." And because I was 16 and naive, I completely fell for it. Q being manipulated into doing the deed, telling him I struggled with my relationship with food and body image only to be told I was flabby afterwards, and all the exhausting mind games. Even through all of that and more, I still utterly adored him and repressed all of my instinctual feelings that were telling me to leave, something I still feel dumb about. I honestly think I was just a toy for him to manipulate and hurt, something he made sure to tell me about after our relationship ended. The way his face would change from loving to like someone I didn't know was kind of terrifying, really. It all messed me up pretty badly, and I still find it hard to trust people. Yes, I dated one briefly, and she nearly ruined my life. I broke up with her when I realized she was mentally unstable after about 5 dates. 6 months later, I was coming home from a party when I found her waiting half undressed in my lobby, asking to please come upstairs. I let her, she disrobed, refused to leave, threatened to smash my things, and when I removed her from the apartment, accused me of attacking her. I was arrested, lost a job I was about to start, and lost 6 months in savings. The night before the hearing, she called me. I was smart enough not to pick up, and the voicemail convinced the prosecutor to drop the case. 3 years later, I got a call from someone claiming to be her husband. She had tried the same thing with him, but he had been dumb enough to marry her, and then dumb enough to pick up the phone after she had accused him. He ended up facing felony charges, lost his medical license, and paid half the value of his home to get rid of her. She'd also apparently attacked his kids, while he had been restrained from being in his own home of 20 years based on her accusations and their 4-week marriage. Clinical psych grad student here. There's going to be a lot of sensationalized responses on here that paint a picture of sociopaths, which is either antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, that is violent and demented. The reality is that sociopaths, just like mentally healthy people, come in all shapes and sizes. Violent tendencies can exist, but aren't necessarily advantageous for people. Many sociopaths end up becoming successful doctors, lawyers, politicians, and most of them don't commit acts of violence or overt aggression. One caveat is that antisocial personality disorder is characterized by acts of criminal or otherwise delinquent behavior, narcissists not quite as much. And yes, I was romantically involved with a sociopath. Ultimately, being with him felt like I'd been thrown into the rapids. I felt disoriented, confused, and betrayed after every serious conversation about his treatment of me. Somehow it was my fault, or criticizing him too much. He refused to apologize and claimed that he wanted an apology for mistreatment and it was manipulation on my part. I told him once that being with him felt like he was holding me by the throat over a great precipice. I didn't want to hold on to him, but if I let go, I feared that I'd fall. He had constructed a world around me in which my reality was no longer real, in which I was never the victim but the ungrateful charity case, and in which he constantly was inventing new ways to torment me psychologically and intimidate me physically. The tumult, the rapids, were ultimately a script of rapidly oscillating states of being. He'd apologize and promise that he'd change. He'd cry and beg for me not to leave him. If I tried to make him leave, he'd pivot to threats or demean me. Everything happened on his terms, even if it didn't seem that way. Outwardly, he appeared to be a patient, kind, and charismatic partner. He was conventionally attractive, intellectually gifted, and socially adored. His views on life were reasonable and measured, and his style of rhetoric is, to this day, one of the most engaging and convincing of anyone I'd ever known. The acts of cruelty and humiliation were rare at first, growing to a crescendo during times in my life when I was the most vulnerable. I lost my best friend. The attacks escalated, then I got a new job and the attacks declined. I left my job and they escalated again. I found a new job and there we were, back to celebrating again. When he was good, he was so good. I'd start to believe that I must have been too hard on him. After all, things only got bad when I was already doing poorly, managing grief, loss, and depression. When I was succeeding, he was succeeding with me. So it seemed reasonable to me, for a while at least, that he was right when he said I was just projecting my inner turmoil onto him. I believed him for a while, but that mask just can't stay on. Eventually, things are too good for too long and he couldn't have that. He always needed to be one step ahead of me. He always needed to have the upper hand, and he always needed to use it to drag me to the edge of the abyss and hold me over while I desperately clutched and grabbed at the arm that held me, begging him not to let go. I now know that this is typical of narcissistic bad actors. I know that his moves were calculated and methodical. I know that he attacked me when I was already down because it was the easiest to manipulate my worldview during those times, and to create a dynamic in which I was so afraid to lose him amongst the other losses that I'd forgive him for whatever he'd done, even if what he'd done was slowly boring a hole into me, removing pieces of myself that I'd left defenseless to exploit. I know now that the true trap is the poison in the sugar. I know that it's the sweetness, the overtures when you're stronger that truly ensnare and contort. I know that it wasn't my fault. It had never been my fault. The red flags I'd seen from the start were warnings I should have heeded, not forgiven, and that in robbing me of myself, in repeatedly gaining and abusing my trust and affection, he was whittling me away from the inside out until I felt more like scattered debris of myself than an entire person capable of walking away when I first realized I had to. I tried to leave him 10 times. It took me 9 months after the attacks first started to get out. 6 after the first serious events started to unravel. I didn't think that sort of thing could happen to me because, well, I'd studied this sort of thing. I knew the signs academically. I was so certain I'd recognize them. I'm a strong, outspoken, and almost aggressively independent person, someone you'd think incapable of victimizing. But there it was. It happened to me. And in having it happened, I understand how truly insidious this kind of thing is. I understand why women can't or don't leave. I understand why I was so wrong to think that they were weak for not fighting or running away. If one of these people is smart, like my partner, they don't just break you down. It doesn't happen all at once. Instead, you become eroded. You're contorted and compromised so slowly that you don't realize what's happening until you've already been ensnared. He never had to lay a single hand on me to be the single worst experience of my entire life. He didn't have to hit me even once to make me afraid of him, alienated from my own body and distanced from my true sense of self. Beyond the obvious words of wisdom that I'm sure most people will impart in this thread, I'd just like to leave you with this, if you're still with me. I'll give you bitter pills and sugar coating. The pills are harmless, the poison is in the sugar. What made a Disneyland mascot break character? I worked the parade route from time to time, making sure kids didn't dart out in front of floats and such. People like me would often be playful with cast members along the parade route, winking and making silly faces. There was one day where Baloo came up to me mid-dance and proceeded to bow to me. Baloo also happened to be wearing some sort of crown or hat thing with a star on top. Baloo probably wasn't aware of how tall that actually made them. Baloo managed to smack me right in the mouth with that star, cutting it open and giving me a fat lip. Fairly certain I heard Baloo audibly gasp when they stood upright again. Paw to mouth. He immediately stopped dancing, just stared at me as I bled. They tried to grab my hands and pull me to them, but their handler came and ushered them along. Whoops! I auditioned to be a face character, and Disneyland made it to the stage where they run through scenarios of unruly guests, rude comments, etc., and you have to respond and come up with responses in character. My dance teacher was also a face more than 20 years ago, and she had all kinds of stories of people trying to reach up her skirt. She was Pocahontas mainly. In the end, I'm glad I didn't make it through. At the time, it was barely above minimum wage, which was like $6.75 an hour or something like that. I chaperoned a gentleman with special needs to Disneyland as part of a group tour. When our group of special needs individuals met the characters, they were all absolutely incredible with our people. Minnie flirted with my friend I took, Merida flirted with me, but the best of all was Cruella de Vil. Normally, she insults who she takes pictures with. With us, she managed to stay in character but not say anything actually mean. She said to one guy with a cane, "Ah, I like your cane. You can use it to beat the little ones out of your way." Disneyland used to have a Tarzan character, but you don't see him anymore. Since the characters are always expected to pose for photos and selfies, and Tarzan wore nothing but a loincloth, women were just constantly grabbing the character's butt when they got close. So the park just quit that character. After some confirmation of the bad behavior, there are still some recent Tarzan sightings. It appears Disney paused the character and redesigned his loincloth costume into one more like a pair of shorts and a jungle vine sash. Apparently women are still grabby, but the costume department tried to make it a little less easy. If they can't break character, does Rapunzel get to hit the preverts with a frying pan? The narrator has read ahead a little, and after seeing how many stories of people behaving inappropriately with these poor costumed employees there are, I kinda wish that appropriate characters like Rapunzel, Mulan, and Kim Possible, who kick a lot of butt, could in fact do so with full approval from their bosses. On a Disney cruise, I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him, he said, "Nope, Peter Pan has brown eyes," or something like that. The next day when we went to get a picture with Peter, he got super close and whispered, "See? Peter has brown eyes." Hands down the best Disney employee I've ever met. This guy played Pluto as well. I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kids started chucking up everywhere. Jack then said, "Too much of the old apple juice, eh, mate?" Been there myself. Even ran out once. All the while, the kid was just projectile spewing everywhere. I just want to say that there's a video on YouTube of some meathead trash-talking Gaston about how he could beat him in a push-up match. They go at it, the meathead gives up, and Gaston cranks out a few more one-handed push-ups just to rub it in. Talk about character. A bit late, but I did the college program at Walt Disney World. Never saw a character break when I worked audience control for parades. Definitely saw a few fully costumed characters chuck up in their heads. And Prince Naveen once got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route fully in character. Once the parade was over, we saw him in the back almost completely passed out. Typically, the parade will speed up to double time if a character actor is in distress. I was at Disneyland once, and the Sheriff of Nottingham was fake menacing a child. He reached out to touch the kid's balloon, and for some reason it popped. The character actor was clearly stunned. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. I remember being in Disneyland Paris when I was 9 and had just gotten a baby Simba plush, which I bought to dinner in one of those character meeting restaurants, where the characters come to your table. Most characters pretended to coo at and tickle Simba. The Sheriff of Nottingham kidnapped Simba. I, of course, got him back. It just took a dramatic fake tug-of-war between Mr. Incredible and the Sheriff of Nottingham to do it. Seriously, these guys are so good at what they do. I saw a recent video on YouTube of Ray talking to this little girl, and her dad just started filming. Apparently, the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard she had to turn her face away and eventually got up and run away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. Okay, in the comments it's explained and she said, "My daughter busted me out for giving her too many donuts and then told Ray she threw up and then persisted to share how she can potty by herself. Right after sharing Secrets of the Force, a complete 180 in the conversation. That's kids for ya. Super adorable." I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time a float caught on fire during the show and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem. He said they played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice and there wasn't any panic or stampeding. He said he'd never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained, and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that you can see at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was 100 degrees, and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he'd be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly, watching both crew and patrons. One time, an acrobat fell off a float, face planted into the ground, and knocked herself out. They had to surround her in a circle and dance in sync as someone dragged the body away. They played it off very well, and apparently nobody noticed. I've seen articles that face characters can leave at any time if their treatment is bad, using in-character excuses. Costume characters always have an attendant with them to control unruly guests. If you behave like that to a costume character, you deserve to be kicked out of Disney. I worked at the Disney store in late '87 and '88 in Orange County, California. I think at the time it was like one of only a handful of stores open. The back of the store had a big screen where we constantly played some Disney video. Every once in a while, the biggest, muscular, blackest, gayest dude would come in and kindly request we play anything Winnie the Pooh related. He'd then proceed to prance around the store, he came in the evenings towards closing, and sing the Tigger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the Tiggers at Disneyland. The guy just loved being Tigger. I'm glad that he did. I can't help but think this sounds like a really tough job where you're expected to give 1,000% all of the time for what seems like minimum wage judging by the early stories. I'm happy that some people seem to thrive in the line of work. My cousin used to do this when I was a kid. We'd always go try to find her on days we knew she was working. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She'd never say out loud, "Hi Jill," using my name, but she'd get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally she'd still say things like, "Oh, I have a rumbly in my tummy." I thought I was the coolest kid because I knew Pooh Bear. I wasn't a character, but I was a cast member. I was walking from backstage into the park. If you've seen the transitions, they're S-shaped to keep people from peeking in. I was pushing a handcart. The ones we used had 2 long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going through, Winnie the Pooh was walking in from the other side. I hit him or her square in the leg with one of the poles. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say, "Oh, frick," was pretty damn funny. A few days ago, my sister and her friend went to the new Galaxy's Edge area. My sister's friend was about 6'1" and had never seen Star Wars. We were walking around and Chewbacca ran up to her, he was around the same height, and hugged her. Then he put his hand above his head, showing that they were both tall. She was super embarrassed, and while they were walking away, he did that fist pump thing. Since then, we refer to her as Chewbacca's girlfriend. Seriously, the cutest thing ever. I couldn't even get the zombies at Halloween Horror Nights to break character. Asked one where the restroom was and he flung his arms in the proper direction and went, "Ugh." Pretty hilarious. I worked character department at Magic Kingdom many years ago. I can't remember breaking character, but I do remember working the restaurant at the Contemporary for dinners. One time we had a Make-A-Wish kid as a guest, and they were just the most awesome kid, and it was just heartbreaking to know why they were there. So our lead let us do a group hangout with the kid for something like an hour in costume, playing and running around and having fun. You could never play like that in the parks, you'd start a riot. No consequences for us though, we all just hoped that we made the little kid happy. Bonus fun fact, the Goofy costume for the Electric Light Parade was worn by a float driver. And because the driver was seated, there were no pants for that costume, just the glittery top and head and gloves. They do not break character. My best childhood friend is a face character. During the interviews, they bring you through a ton of challenging scenarios, like kids with lost parents, kids who act mean, and if you break character, there's 1,000 other people of your exact height and hair color ready to play the character better than you. They even made my friend do an impression of a Disney character without speaking. She just had to be able to portray the essence of the character, and if they couldn't guess who she wrote down, her interview was over. They're incredibly serious about staying in character. Anytime something bad enough would happen that they should break character, their handler would just guide them away and handle it themselves. Bonus info, she isn't allowed to tell anyone who she plays except family and close friends, or post anything about work on social media for the entirety of her time at Disney, or else she'll be fired. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked closely with them as a photographer. Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they're in distress, and it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as these weird situations go, they do get people that stalk them in the park, like some people get in line multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. That weird side of Disney fanatics are something else. Yeah, I heard of one performer who had to get a restraining order after one of her fans got a full back tattoo of her. The tattoo was not of her in character. I don't work for Disney, but I work for Party Princess Productions that does Disney birthday parties on the weekends. I was Darth Vader in Malibu for this kid's birthday. It was only him, which was rare, but we had fun. We played lightsaber hide-and-go-seek, where when he finds me, we duel. I had him practice the Force on me, helping him focus and toss me to the wall. In the middle of all the fun, the kid started coughing. It was subtle at first and then got worse. Got to the point where he's not breathing and he's not moving. I took off my helmet and was about to perform CPR when the mother came out with his inhaler. She told me he can't play anymore because he has bad asthma and it gets worse the more active he is. I put the helmet back on and played things off. We opened presents together and I left. To this day, I hate that mother for watching me play with her kid, knowing his condition and not telling me a word until the poor guy nearly suffocated. I called my boss and told her that I need to know all medical conditions before the party right away from now on. I hope that kid had fun. I still feel horrible for almost killing him from teaching him the ways of the dark side. I wouldn't say break, but I was a lifeguard and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first, and every time he said, "Okay," but he kept going head first, and it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. So I banned him, he left and cried to mum and dad, and I had to explain to them why. They left and cried to my coordinator, and they came back saying it wasn't very magical of me. I explained after several times of this kid not listening, other kids were copying him. In any case, I got a stern talking to about being the nice lifeguard who explains versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day, the kid was running across the deck despite several requests not to, tripped and ate concrete. Oh well, don't hate me because I don't feel bad. Oof. So to stay on topic, I don't know if this is some sort of special lifeguard character that plays at Disneyland or if you just have to maintain a character that feels cartoony. But whether they are caricature or not, listen to your safety officials, people. They're there for a reason. My neighbor, he died a couple of years ago, so I'm safe telling this, worked at Disney for years. One day he was stocking shelves in a gift shop and came around the corner and nearly ran into none other than Paul and Linda McCartney. Before he could stop himself, he loudly exclaimed, "Holy crap, it's the McCartneys!" He immediately realized how big of a breach of Disney cast member etiquette he had committed and turned 12 shades of red, but before anything bad could happen, Paul and Linda just smiled and laughed and introduced themselves. Apparently, they were wonderfully laid back about such things and quite used to surprised reactions when people recognized them in public. He didn't get into any trouble, his boss saw the whole episode and thought it was hilarious, and I think they both signed a hat or something for him while they were checking out. A face performer broke character for my husband and I. I won't say which park, but we took a trip to Disneyland about 2 months after we lost our son. That was our first kid. Our entire nursery was Neverland and Peter Pan themed. We always wanted to take him to Disney, have him meet Peter. Well, he couldn't. I got a memorial tattoo, an exact replica of my son's hospital ink handprint, and we got a picture of Peter Pan with the tattoo. We were alone with him and his handler. I tearfully explained the situation before asking him to pose with my arm. He took lots of photos with my tattoo and us, and afterwards he hugged me tight, told me he was proud of me and God bless us, and he was so sorry for our loss. It was amazing, emotional, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep on living. It honestly meant the world. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory. One of the traditions of our college sorority back in the 80s was that the day after initiation, all the new members and their big sisters would go to Disneyland, sporting their new letters to wear. One of the costumed characters in the parade kept throwing gang signs or something at us, and we were so confused. Turns out it was one of our sisters who had to work that day. She was trying to do our sorority's hand symbol, but with her hands in oversized furry gloves, it didn't show up so well. My wife was goofy for a semester in college. She accidentally ripped the feeding tube out of a Make-A-Wish kid in a wheelchair, going in for a hug with poor visibility from the costume. Luckily, all wandering costumed characters have uniformed handlers to assist, but it's kind of hard to stay in character as Goofy after something like that. She felt terrible and was traumatized for weeks. The kid was fine, at least from that incident. It was a hassle to mitigate, but no medical damage resulted from it. I went once and a man was getting handsy with Cinderella, so she excused herself to the bathroom and ran to a security guard. When I was 6 or so, I went to Disney World with my mum and aunt and cousins. I really wanted Captain Hook's autograph, but per his character, he wasn't supposed to give it. I started crying over it and my mum went and asked him again, nicely I hope, and told him I was very upset over it. He signed my book even though he wasn't supposed to, and I always thought that was neat. So, to Captain Hook from 1989 or so, if you're out there, thanks and I hope you didn't get in trouble for that. They don't break character. If a nuke fell on Disney, they'd be ushering you into the bomb shelters as Aladdin or whoever they were playing at the time. More than 10 years ago, my friend was a face character at Disneyland and told me about her friend who was friends with Goofy, which is what you say to people when you're out of costume to preserve the magic instead of outright saying that you are the character. Allegedly, one day, when Goofy's shift was over, he was trying to walk to the back area to cool off when a very angry mum started yelling at him because he ignored her son. In reality, he couldn't see them as he turned to walk away. The lady then called him a racist and said that Goofy was ignoring them because they were black. Goofy turned around to greet the child and signed his autograph book, then he turned to the mum and slipped up his sleeve to quickly point out his own black skin underneath before walking away. A few people have commented to say that this isn't how the costume works, and that the sleeves aren't possible to pull up from under the gloves. It could be a baloney story, but this is just what I heard from my friend who worked full-time at Disney, alongside a bunch of our other classmates from our performing arts school at the time. I was at Disneyland a couple of weeks ago and I saw Darth Vader not cutting down younglings. It was just unprofessional as all hell. Frankly, the narrator hates all parts of Star Wars that aren't that one exact scene, which I have playing on repeat on my TV after a hard day at work, so character or not, I can understand your frustration. The type of people that play characters are very into it. If something comes up that needs to be addressed, they'll handle it in character. You've probably heard stories about characters helping kids find their parents. These days, characters always have handlers nearby that have walkie-talkies. On the Halloween night, I've seen 2 female employees working the store, not characters, clearly upset by some kind of superior order. The exact dialogue was, "Yeah, sometimes it gets hard. I know it does, but that kind of attitude is unacceptable." I couldn't resist, and I said, "I guess even in Disney, working sometimes sucks." The first girl immediately stood up and smiled as brightly as she could. "What do you mean? Working here is awesome every time." I couldn't help but feel she was agreeing with me, but never breaking the happy land face. This place has a dark side. My mum was a costumed character for a couple of years at Disneyland. She was very committed to keeping character, but there was one instance where she broke. 2 teens jumped her when she was playing Piglet and started attacking her. At first, she just tried to block and defend herself, but at one point she kicked one of the boys to the ground and pinned him. Considering she's 4'10" and was wearing a 50-pound costume, I consider that fairly impressive. The other kid continued attacking her, and I think she might have yelped or cried out because the kid she had pinned heard her and said, "Oh crap, it's a chick!" Like, no crap, dumb frick. Most of the shorter characters are women because, well, they're shorter. Cast members came to help her, and the kids were banned from the park. My mum got in a lot of trouble for that too, though, because she broke character. If I recall correctly, she was suspended for a couple of days. My family went to Disneyland a few times when I was a kid. My dad was just the worst parent, physically and verbally. We left him when I was 12. He was awful on vacations for just being miserable in general. It was Valentine's Day, and my mum, dad, older sister, and I were at one of the parks. I don't remember which one. All the characters had big red hearts on a string around their necks. My sister was, at oldest, 8, and I would have been 6. We'd just gotten ice cream, and my sister and I were excitedly looking around for our favorite characters. My sister just saw Eeyore, her all-time favorite character, so she turned around, and my dad, not paying attention, ran right into my sister, holding her ice cream cone, and got it on his shirt. He was, to put it lightly, not very happy. She starts crying as my mum starts giving him crap while he defended his actions, saying that his daughter should have watched where she was going. The next thing we know is my sister's being hugged by Eeyore. It shocked her out of crying, and she was so incredibly happy because it's Eeyore. Eeyore just kept hugging her while my mum started taking pictures. Eeyore stopped hugging my sister only to point to his paper heart, then to her. Then he hugged her again. There's a picture somewhere in my mum's basement of my sister and I standing with Eeyore, and my sister's beaming but clearly looking like she had just been crying. I still think about Eeyore to this day and wondered what they were thinking. It was the early 90s when people were still largely expected to mind their business when it came to such things. And reading these other comments make me realize he may not have been able to do anything else anyway, but I appreciate his gesture nonetheless. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.